My best friend slept with my roommate who's about to get married. I couldn't keep this secret and chose to inform the roommate's fiancé, MITA. Living with my buddy Alex, who was about to get married, and hanging out with my best friend Ellie was usually the highlight of my days. I'm 26, pretty laid back, and have always kept things simple. Alex, 28, had everything figured out, especially with his wedding around the corner. He and his fiancée Sarah seemed perfect for each other, like something out of a romantic movie. Ellie's been my best friend since our college days. She's full of life, always laughing and making everyone around her feel better. We were like two peas in a pod, but in a completely brother-sister kind of way. She often came over to our place, making our apartment feel more alive. But then, things started to change. Ellie and Alex began to get a bit too close, more than what you'd expect from just friends. At first I told myself it was nothing. Friends get close, right? The revelation hit me like a freight train one evening, when the apartment was cloaked in silence, and the city outside buzzed with life, oblivious to the storm brewing within. I returned home earlier than expected, only to find Ellie and Alex entwined in a way that left no room for doubt. They were quick to separate, their faces flushed with guilt, but the damage was done. The image was seared into my memory, a haunting reminder of the betrayal. It was clear they had feelings for each other, and those feelings had crossed a line. Ever since I found Ellie and Alex, my best friend and roommate, closer than they should have been, my world's been upside down. I wanted to be loyal to both, but my head was a mess. On one hand, Alex was about to get married, and on the other, Ellie has always been like family to me. The apartment we shared, which was once full of jokes and late-night pizza runs, started feeling more like a silent movie. Conversations became whispers when I walked in, and the air felt thick with secrets. I noticed the small things, how they'd suddenly stop talking or how Ellie's visits became more scheduled, especially when I'd be out. It made my chest tight, thinking about it all. I decided to keep it all bottled up inside because, honestly, I didn't want to be the one to cause a hurricane in everyone's lives. I thought maybe, just maybe, if I ignored it long enough, things would go back to normal. I didn't want to be the reason anyone's happiness got ruined, even if it meant putting on a fake smile every day. For 3 whole months I lived in this bubble of hope and fear. Hope that Alex and Ellie would realize their mistake, and fear what would happen if Sarah, Alex's fiancée, found out. It was like walking on a tightrope, trying to balance everything and pretend I was okay with it. Every day was a challenge, trying to act normal around Alex and Ellie. I dodged conversations about relationships, love, or anything that could lead back to the secret I was keeping. It felt like I was living in a different world from them, watching from the outside. I began to pull away, spending more time alone, avoiding coming home. I started making sure they knew when I was about to come home, sending a text or calling to say, "Hey, I'll be there in 10 minutes. I thought it would help me avoid walking in on more moments like that. However, even with all my warnings, it kept happening. Every time I saw them too close, it felt like a punch to the gut. I started to dread going home. My place, which used to be where I could relax, now felt like the last place I wanted to be. So, I stayed out as much as I could. I hung out in coffee shops, wandered around the library, and did anything to stay busy and away from the apartment. It was like I was trying to disappear from my own life because every time I thought about facing them, I just couldn't. It felt like everything around me reminded me of how things had changed and how uncomfortable I felt in my own home. I felt like I was stuck in a really tough spot. Here was my best friend and my roommate, who was about to get married, sneaking around. I kept their secret for 3 months, trying to ignore it and hoping it would just go away. But it ate at me. Sarah, Alex's fiancée, had no idea, and it didn't seem fair to her. The weight of knowing about Ellie and Alex became too much. I felt like I had to do something about it. It wasn't just about being loyal to Alex anymore, it was about doing what seemed right. Telling Sarah about what was happening with Alex and Ellie was one of the hardest things I've ever had to do. It felt like I was carrying the weight of the world on my shoulders, knowing that what I was about to say could potentially ruin lives. But after months of carrying this secret, watching the strain it put on everyone involved, and feeling the weight of it crushing me, I knew it was something that had to be done. No matter how much I wished things could resolve themselves, the reality was clear. Sarah deserved to know the truth. Update. 3 months later, I decided to meet Sarah in a neutral place, somewhere public yet quiet enough for a serious conversation. I chose a small coffee shop in the park, a place that felt serene, hoping it would provide a calm backdrop for the storm I was about to unleash. I remember my hands shaking as I texted her, asking if she could meet me. I tried to sound casual, but every word felt heavy with the weight of what was to come. The day we met, I arrived early, my stomach in knots. As I waited, I rehearsed what I was going to say over and over, but the words felt inadequate. How do you tell someone their world isn't what they think it is? Sarah arrived, her smile bright, unaware of the news I was about to break. Seeing her happiness made what I was about to do even harder. I started the conversation with small talk, trying to ease into it. But how do you ease into something like this? Eventually, I just had to be straightforward. I told Sarah that there was something important I needed to talk to her about, something about Alex. I emphasized that what I was about to share was difficult for me, but I believed she had the right to know. Then, I told her. I explained that over the past few months, Alex and Ellie had grown closer, in a way that wasn't appropriate for two people who were just friends, especially when one of them was about to get married. I shared how I discovered them and the emotional turmoil I'd been through, deciding whether or not to tell her. I made it clear that my intention wasn't to hurt her but to be honest, because I believed she deserved the truth. Throughout the conversation, I watched Sarah's face change from confusion to shock, and then to something I couldn't quite decipher: hurt, maybe, or betrayal. She asked a few questions, her voice shaky, and I answered as honestly as I could, providing the details she sought. It was heartbreaking to see her process the information, to watch as the reality of the situation sank in. After telling her, I felt a mix of relief and dread. Relief that I had finally shared the secret that had been weighing me down, and dread for what it meant for Sarah, Alex, and Ellie. I offered Sarah my support, whatever decision she made about her future with Alex. I could tell she was shattered. I felt awful, but part of me knew it was better she heard it from me than someone else, or even worse, after the wedding. Walking away from that conversation was like leaving a part of myself behind. I knew things would never be the same after that, but I also knew I had done what I believed was right. It was a moment that changed the course of our lives, a decision made with a heavy heart but a clear conscience. The next few days were like walking through a minefield. Sarah confronted Alex, and the fallout was explosive. I wasn't there, but Alex made sure I knew he blamed me for everything. He came home that night, his face like thunder, and we had it out. "How could you?" he kept saying, over and over, like a broken record. I tried to explain my side, saying I couldn't just stand by and watch him make a mistake that big. But Alex wasn't having any of it. He saw it as the ultimate betrayal. Ellie, on the other hand, was a mix of angry and sad. She thought I had backstabbed them by not keeping their secret. Our friendship, once unbreakable, started showing cracks. She said she understood why I did it, but wished I hadn't. Our conversations became stiff, filled with awkward silences and unspoken words. It was clear things were never going back to how they were. The atmosphere at the apartment turned icy. Alex and I barely spoke, and when we did, it was just the essentials. It felt like I was living with a stranger, not the guy who had been my best friend. Ellie stopped coming over, and our group of friends picked up on the tension. Sides were taken, and suddenly, I found myself on the outside. It was like high school all over again, only lonelier. I started spending more time out of the apartment, staying late at work, wandering around the city, or sitting in parks just to avoid going home. The place I had loved, filled with so many good memories, now felt like a prison. The worst part was the isolation. Friends I thought I had in my corner slowly drifted away, unsure of how to navigate the new dynamics. The emotional toll was heavy. I struggled with guilt, wondering if I had made the right decision. Sleepless nights were common, and I found myself questioning not just my actions, but my judgment. Had I really done the right thing, or had I just destroyed relationships for the sake of my own conscience? Eventually, the situation at the apartment became unbearable. Alex decided he couldn't live with me anymore, and I couldn't blame him. The search for a new place was quick, I just wanted out. Moving out was a relief and a defeat all at once. It felt like I was running away, but I also knew staying wasn't an option. The day I left, the apartment was silent. Alex didn't help me move, and there were no goodbyes. It was a quiet end to a chapter of my life I had thought would last much longer. In the weeks that followed, the fallout continued. Sarah called off the wedding, and though she didn't blame me, our interactions were tinged with the sadness of what had happened. Alex and I lost touch completely, our brotherhood a casualty of the truth. Ellie and I tried to salvage our friendship, but it was like trying to piece together a broken vase. We could put it on the shelf, but it would never hold water again. Looking back, I wonder if things could have been different if I had stayed silent. But deep down, I know I couldn't have lived with myself. The price of honesty was high, and I paid it in friendships and heartache. But lying to myself and everyone else would have cost me even more. In the end, I learned that some truths are heavy, but carrying lies is heavier still. After the storm of revelations and the shifting sands of friendships lost, the days began to brighten for me. It wasn't immediate, the healing. It felt more like the slow bloom of spring after a harsh winter. I moved into a new apartment, a small but bright space that felt like a fresh start. In the solitude of my new surroundings, I found peace and, surprisingly, a sense of freedom I hadn't realized I'd been missing. The void left by old friendships made room for new ones. I dove into hobbies that I'd put on the back burner, joined a local soccer team, and even picked up guitar lessons. These activities brought me into circles I wouldn't have otherwise crossed, and through them, I met people who brought new perspectives and laughter back into my life. As for Ellie and Alex, time proved to be a great healer. Ellie reached out first, a tentative text that opened the door to reconciliation. Our friendship, once fractured, began to mend, not as it was but into something new, more mature. We acknowledged the past but chose to focus on the future, celebrating our new paths and supporting each other as we always had. Alex's journey took longer, but a chance encounter at a mutual friend's wedding brought us back into the same orbit. The initial awkwardness gave way to a heartfelt conversation, where apologies were exchanged, and forgiveness was granted. It was a reminder that while friendships can break under the weight of secrets, they can also rebuild, stronger in the broken places. My career took an unexpected but welcome turn when I was offered a position at a startup. The work was challenging but rewarding, and it came with the added bonus of travel, allowing me to see parts of the world I had only dreamed of. On one of these trips, I met Maya, a fellow traveler with a thirst for adventure and a kindness that drew me in. Our connection was instant, and what started as a shared journey through foreign lands blossomed into a partnership I had longed for but never found. Years down the line, as I reflect on the tumultuous period that reshaped my life, I see it not as a time of loss but as a crucible that forged my character and my future. Ellie, Alex and I, though forever changed by the events, found a way to coexist in each other's lives, a testament to the enduring strength of true friendship. And with Maya by my side, exploring the world and building a life together, I am reminded that sometimes, the hardest roads lead to the most beautiful destinations. Happiness, I learned, isn't the absence of pain or conflict but the resilience to move through it and find joy on the other side. My story, once marked by betrayal and heartache, is now a narrative of growth, forgiveness, and new beginnings. And for that, I am profoundly grateful. Finally, I want to extend my sincerest thanks to all of you who have taken the time to share your stories on Reddit. Please continue to journey with us, share your experiences, and together, let's create memorable moments. After my father was sentenced to 25 years in prison, my stepmother mistreated me. Should I send her and her despicable boyfriend to jail? Life, as I knew it, crumbled the day my father was sentenced to 25 years to life in prison. My name is Alex, and I'm a 16-year-old trying to navigate a world that suddenly feels alien. The day the gavel came down, sealing my father's fate, marked the end of normalcy for me. It's strange how quickly life can pivot on a single moment, thrusting you into a narrative you never asked to be part of. Before that pivotal moment, we were a typical family, or as typical as any family can claim to be. My father, a man of strong principles but perhaps too rigid in his ways, was the anchor of our household. He ran a small local garage, a place where I spent countless afternoons after school, handing him tools or sweeping floors, basking in the mundane but comforting routine of our life. My mother, or rather my stepmom, Julia, entered our lives when I was 10. She brought a semblance of softness to our otherwise stoic home. Back then, she was the bridge between my father and me, translating his often harsh expectations into lessons of resilience and ambition. However, the tranquility of our existence was deceptive, hiding the brewing storm beneath its calm surface. My father, unbeknownst to me, had been entangled in activities far removed from the honest labor of his garage. It was a side of him that he kept well hidden, a shadowy figure that I would only come to know in the wake of his arrest. The details trickled in slowly, painting a picture of a man driven to desperate measures under the crushing weight of debt and a faltering business. He had become involved in a series of illegal dealings, a last-ditch effort to salvage his faltering garage and secure our financial future. But the law, with its indifferent gaze, sees not the desperation but the deed. And so, my father was found guilty, leaving behind a family thrust into the throes of uncertainty and public scrutiny. The immediate aftermath of his imprisonment was a blur of hushed conversations, tear-streaked faces, and the ominous silence that settled over our home. Julia, once a beacon of warmth and stability, transformed overnight. It was as if the sentencing had flipped a switch, revealing a side of her I had never known. Her affection, once freely given, became a scarce commodity, replaced by a cold detachment that left me reeling. I became the unintended recipient of her frustrations, a living reminder of the life that had crumbled around us. The household chores, once shared tasks, fell solely on my shoulders, a constant grueling reminder of how drastically our lives had changed. It was in these moments of isolation and relentless labor that I began to question the familial bonds that were supposed to sustain us through such trials. The transformation of my stepmom, once a figure of warmth and security in my life, into someone I barely recognized, was as swift as it was shocking. In the wake of my dad's imprisonment, our household, once filled with laughter and occasional arguments about trivial things like what to watch on TV or who would do the dishes, had morphed into a battleground of silence and tension. My stepmom's demeanor underwent a drastic change. Where she used to greet me with a smile in the mornings, now there was barely a nod or a grunt of acknowledgement as we crossed paths in the dimly lit hallways of our home. Before the new man came into our lives, my stepmom tried to sweeten the impending change with words dipped in honey, promising me that things would get better and that this man would bring a sense of normalcy back into our lives. She painted a picture of a future where we could all move past the shadow cast by my father's sentence, attempting to mask the bitterness of betrayal with false hope and promises. Yet, her visits to my father in prison were sporadic at best, and when she did go, it seemed more a performance for the benefit of onlookers than a genuine act of concern for the man she had married. On one such visit, when I attempted to breach the subject of her new companion, she cut me off sharply, her eyes darting around as if afraid someone might overhear the truth behind the facade she presented. Life as I knew it began to unravel the moment my father's sentence was handed down. The absence of his presence in our home was like a void that grew with each passing day, a constant reminder of the stability we once had but lost. However, nothing prepared me for the shift that occurred when my stepmom decided it was time to introduce someone new into our already fragile existence. Mark extended his hand, not in a gesture of greeting but rather as if he was bestowing an honor upon me by acknowledging my existence. "So, this is the little F word you were talking about," were the first words he chose to speak, his voice dripping with disdain. The smile on my stepmom's face faltered for a moment, but she quickly recovered, laughing it off as though it was the most natural thing in the world to insult her stepson upon first meeting. I stood there, taken aback, not by the insult, but by the realization that this was the man my stepmom had brought into our lives, into our home, with the expectation that I would accept him. My height, which towered over his by a few inches, seemed to be the only shield I had against the diminutive nature of his character. As he walked past me to survey the house, his eyes scanned each room with a covetousness that made my skin crawl. I followed him, curious yet cautious, until he stopped abruptly, turning to face me. "You got a problem?" he asked, his eyes narrowing. "No," I replied, my voice steady despite the rapid beating of my heart. "Do you need help finding something?" That's when it happened. Faster than I could react, Mark reached out, grabbing my arm and twisting it behind my back in a painful grip. The shock of the sudden assault rendered me momentarily helpless, but survival instincts kicked in. With all the strength I could muster, I kicked backward, hitting him on the leg. His grip loosened just enough for me to break free, and with one more push, he stumbled backward, falling to the ground. The sound of the fall seemed to echo through the house, and within seconds, my stepmom was by our side. But instead of concern, her eyes blazed with fury directed not at Mark, but at me. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" she screamed, grabbing me by the arm and pulling me towards the door. I tried to explain, to tell her that Mark had attacked me first, but my words fell on deaf ears. With a strength fueled by anger, she threw me out of the house, her slaps and words following me out into the cold night. "After your dad got arrested, you became nothing more than a low-level bullshit that no one cares about," she yelled, the door slamming shut behind me, leaving me alone in the darkness. The slap from my stepmom echoed in my ears, a sound that marked the severing of whatever fragile bond we had left. My cheek stung, a physical manifestation of her betrayal and anger towards me. In a daze, I stood outside the door, my mind racing with confusion and hurt. I couldn't understand how things had escalated to this point, how the woman who had been a part of my life for so long could turn on me so quickly. I remember apologizing, my words a desperate attempt to mend the rapidly widening rift between us. "I didn't mean to," I began, but my apology was cut short by another slap, her hand striking my other cheek with a force that left me speechless. The door slammed shut, leaving me in a silence that was louder than any words could ever be. Standing there, in the cold dark night, I called out, hoping for a semblance of reason to pierce through the madness. The door opened, but it wasn't my stepmom who answered. It was him, Mark. The man who had ignited this firestorm with his mere presence. In his hands, he clutched some of my clothes, which he threw at my feet with a disdain that made my stomach churn. His words cut through the night, each one a knife twisting deeper into my already wounded heart. He cursed me, mocked me about becoming homeless, and called me the child of a criminal, saying no one would protect me now. His laughter, gloating and cruel, filled the air, urging me to hurry up and move on. "This house is mine," he declared, as if staking his claim on a territory that was never his to begin with. The humiliation of that moment was something I had never experienced before. It was one thing to be cast out by my stepmom, but to be ridiculed and belittled by a man who knew nothing of my life, my family, or the struggles we had faced, was a different kind of pain altogether. The words "no one will protect you" echoed in my head, a chilling reminder of the isolation I now faced. As I gathered my clothes from the ground, his laughter still ringing in my ears, a sense of resolve began to form within me. Yes, I was the child of a man who was now in prison, but that did not define me. My current circumstances, as dire as they seemed, would not be the end of my story. The cruelty of Mark's words and actions only served to strengthen my determination to prove him wrong, to show the world that I was more than the sum of my family's mistakes. I wrapped the clothes around me, a meager shield against the cold, and took a step away from the house that was no longer a home. With each step, I felt a mixture of fear and defiance. Fear of the unknown, of the challenges that lay ahead, but also defiance against those who would see me fail, who took pleasure in my suffering. The road ahead was uncertain, filled with obstacles and trials, but I knew I had to face them head on. I couldn't allow the words and actions of others to dictate my worth or my future. I was alone, yes, but I was also free. Free from the toxic environment that had sought to break me. Free to make my own choices and carve out my own path. As I walked, the laughter and curses faded into the background, replaced by a quiet determination. I didn't know where I was going, but I knew I couldn't stay here, in the shadow of a home that had turned its back on me. The journey would be difficult, but it was mine to make, and I would face it with all the strength I had. The cold bit into my skin, but it was the words, the betrayal, that chilled me to the bone. As I walked away from the house, the home that no longer felt like mine, I couldn't help but wonder how things had come to this. My stepmom, the woman who had been a part of my life for years, had chosen a stranger over me, had thrown me out into the night without a second thought. The walk to the police station was a blur, my mind racing with thoughts and emotions I couldn't fully comprehend. When I finally arrived, shivering and with the beginnings of frostbite nipping at my fingers, I was met with a kindness I hadn't expected. The officer at the desk listened as I recounted the events of the evening, his expression one of concern rather than judgment. He didn't question my actions, didn't blame me for defending myself. Instead, he took immediate steps to ensure my safety, offering me a place to stay until we could figure out what to do next. As I sat in the warmth of the police station, the events of the night replaying over and over in my mind, I couldn't help but feel a sense of isolation. My stepmom's actions had drawn a line, making it clear where her loyalties lay. The betrayal stung, leaving me with a myriad of emotions that I couldn't quite sort through. Anger, sadness, confusion, all swirled within me, creating a tumultuous storm that I had no idea how to navigate. The only thing I was certain of was that my life had taken a dark turn, one that I would have to face head on, regardless of the uncertainty that lay ahead. In the aftermath of that night, the reality of my situation began to settle in. My relationship with my stepmom, already strained by the loss of my father to the prison system, had fractured beyond repair. The home I had known, the life I had lived, had been irrevocably changed by the actions of a man I had just met and the woman who had chosen him over her own family. Determined to seek justice, I decided to take the matter to court. In the courtroom, the tension was palpable as the trial began. I sat in the back row, feeling a mix of anxiety and nervousness rising within me. Next to me was my lawyer, who had been my steadfast companion throughout the preparation for this trial. They had helped me gather evidence, plan our strategy, and understand my rights. The trial began as the judge entered, and everyone stood. After the judge sat down and the room settled, the prosecutor started presenting the case. They laid out the evidence of my stepmother and her boyfriend's abuse, including police reports, photos, and testimonies from me and witnesses. The prosecutor called me to the stand. Before stepping up, I took a deep breath, trying to calm myself. I recounted in detail what had happened, from being attacked by Mark to my stepmother throwing me out of the house and their hurtful words. Every story I told, every detail I remembered, brought both pain and determination to seek justice. My stepmother and her boyfriend's lawyer repeatedly questioned me, trying to undermine my testimony, but I was prepared and answered confidently. My lawyer had also prepared questions to clarify the events, helping me convey my story clearly and coherently. Next, the prosecutor called other witnesses, including neighbors who had seen the abuse and the police officer who took me in that night. Their testimonies further supported my story, painting a clearer picture of the abuse for the judge and jury. Finally, it was the defense's turn. They tried to justify their actions and provide explanations to lessen their responsibility. However, the evidence was too clear and convincing, making their defense weak and unpersuasive. After all the presentations, The judge called for a recess to review the evidence and hear the jury's opinion. I waited, my anxiety and nervousness increasing. In my mind, images of my stepmother and Mark, their hurtful words and violent actions, kept replaying. Finally, the judge and jury returned to the courtroom. The judge announced that based on the evidence and testimonies, they had reached a decision. My stepmother and Mark were found guilty of child abuse and neglect. Their sentence was several years in prison, and I would be placed with a new family where I could find safety and stability. Hearing the verdict, I felt an indescribable sense of relief. Justice had finally been served. I knew that the road ahead would still be challenging, but I believed that I had taken the first step in reclaiming my rights and protecting myself. Leaving the courtroom, I saw my lawyer waiting. They smiled at me, a smile of encouragement and support. I knew that no matter how difficult life might be, I could overcome it and find hope in those willing to help and support me. My dad turned to drink and criticized Mom after her brother cheated us, causing us to lose land. I am Mary, a sophomore in college, and my life today feels like a shadow of what it once was. Just a few years ago, my family embodied the warmth and joy that I believed would always define us. My father, a robust man with an infectious laugh, was the kind of dad who would spend hours in the garden, teaching me and my younger brother, Alex, the names of all the flowers and how to take care of them. My mother, a gentle soul with eyes that seemed to hold endless kindness, made our small cozy house a home with her loving touch and the heavenly smell of her cooking. Back then the future seemed bright. Our little family was tight-knit, bound by love and shared dreams, especially after my parents managed to buy a hectare of land from my uncle, my mother's brother. That land was more than just soil and greenery, it represented a legacy, a future where our family could build and grow, both literally and metaphorically. We envisioned a small family farm, maybe a few rental cottages that could nestle in the shade of the large oak trees dotting the landscape. It was a symbol of stability and hope, a tangible piece of prosperity that promised to anchor our family for generations. My Uncle James, my mother's younger brother, had always been a charismatic and persuasive figure. Growing up, I saw him as a fun-loving uncle who seemed to breeze through life, always with a ready joke or a small gift for me and Alex. He was a frequent visitor in our home, his arrival often heralding impromptu barbecues and late-night storytelling sessions. My mother adored him. She often spoke of their childhood adventures with a fondness and nostalgia that painted my uncle as not just a sibling but a hero in her eyes. This deep familial bond made him more than just an uncle to us. He was an integral part of our family fabric. My parents, especially my mother, trusted him implicitly. This trust was rooted in decades of shared history and mutual support. When Uncle James spoke, his words carried the weight of sincerity. Or so we believed. In hindsight, the signs of his financial instability were there, but they were subtle, overshadowed by his charm and our trust. He mentioned struggles now and then, hints about the economy, bad investments, the rising costs of living, but they were always presented as temporary setbacks. Nothing a good next move couldn't fix. So when Uncle James offered to sell a hectare of his land to my parents in 2013, it seemed like a golden opportunity. The land was located on the outskirts of our town, a lush expanse of green that bordered a small forest. My parents had always dreamed of owning more land, perhaps starting a small organic farm or building a few holiday cottages to rent out. The land my uncle offered seemed perfect for such dreams. The deal was straightforward, or so it seemed. Uncle James explained that he was selling the land because he needed liquidity to fund my cousin's college education. He painted a vivid picture. The land, once developed, could be the foundation of our family's financial security. My parents, eager to invest in our future and to help my uncle, agreed to buy it. The price was reasonable, the terms favorable, and the paperwork appeared to be in order, except for one detail. The Red Book, the official document proving land ownership, was still under the bank's hold due to a small loan my uncle had taken out. With reassurances from Uncle James that the loan would be cleared within a year, my parents proceeded. He crafted a promissory note, a casual yet seemingly earnest document, wherein he vowed to clear the debt and transfer the Red Book to my parents as soon as possible. Trusting him, they paid him the money, believing that the formalities were just a formality. Months turned into a year, and the promised Red Book did not materialize. My parents grew anxious, but each inquiry was met with reassurances and new promises from Uncle James. He always had a reason for the delay: paperwork snafus, bank errors, bureaucratic red tape. But his charm and our family's trust in him kept my parents from pressing too hard. This pattern continued until late 2018. That was when everything changed. The financial bubble that Uncle James had been inflating burst with shocking consequences. It turned out that the initial loan against the land was just the tip of an iceberg. Uncle James had been drowning in debt, far more than he had disclosed. In a desperate move, he had taken out further loans against the land, each one a deeper cut into the trust my parents had placed in him. The final blow came abruptly. Uncle James declared bankruptcy, and within weeks, we learned that he had fled the country. The news was delivered by a bank representative who arrived one crisp autumn morning to place foreclosure signs around the hectare that we thought was ours. The bank explained that the land was heavily mortgaged, far beyond its worth, and would be seized to cover my uncle's debts. The revelation shattered my parents. The betrayal by someone they had trusted so deeply was a wound that went beyond financial loss. My father particularly felt deceived and humiliated. He had advocated for the deal, swayed by my mother's trust in her brother and by the dreams they had harbored for that piece of land. The loss was not just a plot of earth, it was a future they had envisioned and promised to us. As the legal realities settled in, so did the bitterness. My father's sense of betrayal morphed into a festering anger that found its easiest outlet in my mother, who, despite being a victim herself, bore the brunt of his accusations and grief. The man who had once been the life of our family gatherings was now a source of tension and despair. In this new harsh light, every memory of Uncle James was recast. The laughter and gifts, once signs of his generosity, now seemed part of a facade that hid his deceit. His stories, once enchanting, now felt like manipulations. The trust that had once bound our family to him had turned into a chain that dragged us down into a mire of betrayal and regret. The descent into despair was gradual at first, like the slow setting of the sun before darkness fully takes hold. My father, once a pillar of strength and joy in our household, succumbed to the weight of his disillusionment. His days began and ended with the bitter tang of alcohol, the bottles accumulating like silent markers of his decline. He no longer tended to his business, a small landscaping company that had flourished due to his love for nature and his dedication to his craft. Instead, he let calls go unanswered, projects unfinished, and slowly, the vibrant man who had raised me with laughter and lessons in resilience, succumbed to a listless apathy. It was not just the loss of the land that broke him, but the betrayal by his own brother-in-law, and the crushing responsibility of having convinced my mother to trust her brother. In his eyes, his failure was twofold. Not only had he failed to protect our financial future, but he had also placed his faith in a man who destroyed us. This sense of failure consumed him, leading him to relinquish all his hard work as if in surrender to an unseen foe. He wandered through his days like a ghost, his presence marked more by the trail of empty bottles than by any interaction with us. My mother bore the brunt of this transformation. The sharp edge of my father's tongue turned against her in his darkest moments. He accused her of complicity, of knowing her brother's intentions and yet leading us into ruin. His words were like daggers, and they sliced through the fabric of her self-worth every day. "Your family is a bunch of scammers," he would shout, the alcohol fueling his anger, turning it into a wildfire that consumed any remnants of peace within our home. Despite the onslaught, my mother's resilience was something to behold. She absorbed the verbal blows with a kind of stoic grace, her eyes often wet with unshed tears, but her posture remained unbroken. She became the buffer between my father's wrath and the rest of us, especially for Alex, my younger brother, who was just entering his teenage years amidst our family's crisis. Alex's rebellion against the situation was fierce and protective. He could not bear to see our mother demeaned and insulted. His confrontations with our father began as verbal skirmishes, challenging the unfairness of his accusations, defending our mother's honor with a boldness that both scared and awed me. "Stop blaming Mom, she didn't do anything wrong," he would yell back, his young voice cracking under the strain of his emotions. These clashes often escalated until the house felt like a battlefield, the air so thick with tension it was hard to breathe. Witnessing these exchanges tore at me. I was caught in a relentless storm of emotions, anger at my uncle for his deceit, despair over my father's downfall, and a deep gnawing pain for my mother's suffering. Each evening, as I heard my father's slurred accusations and my brother's desperate defenses, I felt a part of my heart crumble. The helplessness was overwhelming. I was a spectator in my own life, watching the people I loved tear each other apart. My mother, amidst this chaos, tried to maintain some semblance of normalcy. She went about her daily routines, cooking meals that none of us had the heart to eat, cleaning a house that no longer felt like a home, and trying, always trying, to mediate between my father and brother. Her efforts were Herculean, and yet, I could see the toll it took on her. The circles under her eyes grew darker each day, her smiles more forced and fleeting. She often pulled me aside, her hands clutching mine with a desperation that was hidden from the others. "Take care of your studies, Mary. Don't worry about us," she would whisper, her voice trembling. But how could I not worry? How could I focus on college applications and exams when home was a place of war? The weight of her suffering became my constant companion. I lay awake at night, listening to the echoes of their arguments, and wondered how much more we could withstand. The fear of the phone ringing with news of something worse kept me on edge, a perpetual anxiety that gnawed at my concentration, my peace. In those moments when the house finally quieted down, I would find my mother in the living room, staring out the window. Sometimes I joined her, sitting in silence as we both lost ourselves in the world outside. It was during one of these silent vigils that she finally broke down and shared her deepest fears. "I'm scared, Mary," she confessed, her voice a whisper. "Scared that he'll never forgive me. Scared of losing you and Alex to this hatred." Her admission shattered the last barriers I had put up to protect myself. I realized then that my role wasn't just to be a bystander. I needed to be her ally, Alex's support, and perhaps, find a way to reach my father. But the path to healing seemed obscured by the thick fog of past mistakes and present pain. Life at home had become a landscape of suspicion and bitterness. My father's distrust had deepened to a point where even the simplest acts of familial kindness were scrutinized and tainted with accusations. My mother's occasional visits to her mother's house, or her attempts to maintain some semblance of connection with her parents through gifts or phone calls, were not spared from my father's critical eye. He saw these gestures not as acts of love but as betrayals, further proof of conspiracies woven in his mind. One chilly afternoon, I returned from school to find the house unusually cold and quiet. My mother sat at the kitchen table, her face weary and lined with fresh worries. She looked up as I entered, managing a weak smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. She had been to visit Grandma, who was unwell, and had brought her some homemade soup and a warm blanket. When my father had learned of this, he exploded in rage, accusing her of wasting our scarce resources on her family, whom he now viewed almost as enemies. "Doesn't matter what I do, it's always wrong in his eyes," she confided in me, her voice breaking. "But I can't just stop caring for my mom, Mary. I can't." The situation with the phone calls was even worse. Every ring stirred a palpable tension in the air. My father, often fueled by his drunken stupor, would accuse my mother of conspiring with her brother, my uncle, despite my uncle having disappeared years ago. He couldn't seem to grasp that no one in the family had heard from him since he fled, leaving us to deal with the fallout of his actions. Each call, no matter the caller, seemed to him a ghostly echo of past betrayals, a reminder of the trust that had been broken and the financial security that had been stolen from us. Despite these overwhelming pressures, my mother continued to shoulder the responsibility of not just trying to keep our family together, but also ensuring that my two sisters and I could continue our education. My sisters, both younger than me, were in high school, facing their own battles with the ripple effects of our family's crisis. The cost of education was a constant worry, but my mother was determined that the chaos at home would not derail our futures. Seeing her struggle, I made the decision to take on a part-time job alongside my studies. I was now a freshman at a local community college, having chosen a school close to home to reduce expenses and stay near my family. My days were a blend of classes, studying, and working late shifts at a nearby cafe. Every paycheck I received went partly to help out at home and partly to cover my own educational expenses. This dual role of student and financial contributor was exhausting. There were nights I came home so tired that I could barely make it through dinner before falling asleep over my textbooks. Yet, seeing my mother's quiet gratitude and the way she fought to keep us all moving forward gave me the strength to keep going. She managed our meager finances with a precision and care that was nothing short of heroic, stretching every dollar to cover not just school fees, but the basic necessities of life. Her resilience was our family's unsung melody, a quiet background score that pushed us all to persevere. My mother never complained about her lot, accepting each day's troubles with a resolve that was both heartbreaking and inspiring. Her love for us was an unspoken promise, a commitment that she lived out by enduring the harsh words and the colder silences from my father. My younger sisters, witnessing all this, grew in their own resilience. We became a team, albeit a silent one, finding comfort in shared glances and quiet conversations away from the storms that frequently brewed in our living room. We helped each other with homework, shared responsibilities around the house, and saved little surprises for our mother. Like the time we all chipped in to buy her a new book by her favorite author, hiding it under her pillow to find after a particularly hard day. In these moments, we found our pockets of peace, small oases of normalcy in a desert of chaos. My father's outbursts and suspicions became the storms we learned to weather, building stronger shelters in our bonds with each other. Each challenge, while painful, forged us into more than just siblings and a mother. It made us allies in a struggle that none of us had chosen but all of us were determined to survive. As I lay in bed each night, listening to the faint sounds of the house settling, I thought about my mother's sacrifices and my father's pain. The journey was far from easy, and many days, the burden of what we were enduring seemed too much to bear. But in the strength of my mother's unwavering love and the shared resolve of my sisters, I found a flicker of hope that perhaps, someday, we might find a way through the darkness, back to a place where love and trust could bloom once more in our family garden. It was a typical Thursday afternoon, The cafe bustling with the usual crowd of students and local professionals grabbing their midday coffee fix. As a waiter, I navigated through the tables with practiced ease, balancing trays filled with steaming beverages and the cafe's signature pastries. The hum of conversations mixed with the clatter of cups created a familiar soundtrack to my shifts. It was amidst this cacophony that I caught a glimpse of something, or rather someone, that froze me in my tracks. From the corner of my eye, I noticed a figure outside the large front window, a silhouette that was hauntingly familiar. The posture, the way he carried himself, it was unmistakably reminiscent of someone I had hoped to forget. My heart skipped a beat as I told myself it couldn't possibly be him. My uncle, the man responsible for so much of my family's misery, had reportedly fled abroad, a cowardly escape from the financial and emotional wreckage he had caused. Surely I was mistaken. But as the figure approached and entered through the cafe's front door, the reality of his identity became undeniable. It was indeed my uncle. The shock of seeing him there, in flesh and blood, after all the rumors of his departure overseas, left me rooted to the spot. Time seemed to slow as he casually strolled up to the counter, oblivious to the storm of emotions his presence had stirred in me. Dressed incongruously in a crisply tailored suit that seemed to mock the ruin he had left behind, he appeared not only unscathed by the ordeal, but prosperous. The fabric of his coat was fine, clearly expensive, with a sheen that caught the light as he moved. His shoes were polished to a mirror shine, and he wore a watch that glinted under the cafe's overhead lights, a stark contrast to the image of a bankrupt fugitive. As he ordered his coffee, chatting amiably with my co-worker, a surge of anger welled up inside me. Here was the man who had betrayed his own sister, my mother, leaving her to shoulder the burden of his deceit. Her life had become a daily struggle to maintain some semblance of normalcy for us, her children, while he seemingly enjoyed the freedom purchased at our expense. My hands trembled slightly as I took in the sight of him, so at ease, so removed from the consequences of his actions. How could he stroll into my workplace, a place just a stone's throw from the school where I studied and worked to support my family because of the financial mess he had created? The unfairness of it all, the injustice, burned through me. I felt profound sorrow for my mother. She had aged visibly in the past few years, each day etching more lines of worry and exhaustion onto her face. Her nights were restless, often spent in tearful worry, her dreams haunted by the fallout of trusting her brother. And here he was, dressed in a suit that likely cost more than what she could spare on groceries in a month. As my uncle took a seat with his coffee, I wrestled with what to do next. Confronting him was my first instinct. To unleash the pent-up frustration, to tell him about the suffering his actions had continued to cause. Yet, as I watched him, a middle-aged man enjoying his coffee, seemingly content with his world, doubt crept in. What could a confrontation realistically achieve? After a few moments of internal debate, I approached his table, my resolve firming with each step. "Uncle James," I said, my voice steady despite the turmoil inside. He looked up, his expression one of mild surprise that shifted quickly to recognition. And fleetingly, something that might have been guilt. "Mary," he replied, his tone cautious. "It's been a long time. You've grown." "Yes," I said, the words tasting bitter. "A lot has changed since you left." We talked then, or rather, I spoke while he listened. I told him about the hardships we faced, about my father's decline, and my mother's silent resilience. I spoke of the responsibilities that had fallen onto my shoulders far too early, the dreams that had to be adjusted, and the family fabric that had been torn apart. He offered explanations, some semblance of regret, though whether it was genuine or not, I couldn't say. He spoke of bad luck and worse choices, of his own losses and regrets. But no apology could undo the damage, no words could reclaim the years of pain and hardship his deceit had wrought upon us. The conversation ended with no dramatic resolution, no promises of restitution. He left, and I returned to my duties, the encounter leaving a mix of sadness and catharsis. I hadn't changed anything, not really, but speaking my truth had lightened something within me. The afternoon had taken a turn I could never have anticipated. After meeting with my uncle at the cafe, I returned home filled with a mix of emotions. It felt important to share the encounter with my mother, to relay not just his words but the sheer normalcy with which he had presented himself. My mother listened quietly, her expression somber, absorbing every detail with a heavy heart. As I spoke, her eyes reflected a deep sadness, a well of emotions that seemed too vast and complex for words. She was silent for a long time, the air between us filled with unspoken thoughts and lingering heartache. It was a silence that spoke volumes, resonating with the weight of all we had endured, all that had been broken and lost because of my uncle's actions. Suddenly, the fragile quiet was shattered by a loud, angry voice. My father, who had been out of sight but not out of earshot, stormed into the room. His face was flushed with anger, his eyes alight with the kind of fiery intensity that had become all too familiar. He had overheard everything, and the information acted like fuel on the already burning fire of his resentment. Without a moment's hesitation, he launched into a tirade. The words were harsh and unforgiving, aimed indiscriminately at my mother, my uncle, and all her relatives. He accused them once again of conspiracy and betrayal, his voice rising to a crescendo of fury and frustration. The pain and bitterness he felt towards my uncle were now tangled with a renewed sense of betrayal, knowing that my uncle was back and living seemingly without consequence. In his rage, he turned towards a shelf in our living room, one that held various family dishes and heirlooms, and began to smash them one by one onto the floor. The sound of shattering porcelain filled the room, each crash a hammer blow to the already fragile peace of our household. My mother's face crumpled in despair at the sight, her hands trembling as she covered her mouth to stifle her sobs. I stood frozen for a moment, shocked and scared by the intensity of my father's outburst. The room felt smaller somehow, as if each broken piece of dishware was a fragment of our family's unity, irretrievably damaged. Amidst the chaos I found my voice, albeit shaky, and tried to intervene. "Dad, please stop. This isn't helping anything," I pleaded, my own voice edged with desperation. But my words seemed to fuel his anger further. He turned his wrath towards me, accusing me of siding with traitors, and questioning my loyalty to our family. The accusations were like slaps to the face, harsh and stinging. I struggled to maintain my composure, to stand strong in the face of the storm. My mother, amidst her tears, tried to calm him, reaching out to touch his arm in a plea for peace. But he was beyond consolation, caught up in his own spiral of anger and hurt. The situation escalated until, finally, exhausted and spent, he left the room, leaving behind a trail of emotional and physical wreckage. The aftermath was a heavy silence, the air thick with the scent of dust and broken porcelain. My mother sank into a chair, her body racked with quiet sobs. I moved to her side, wrapping my arms around her in a silent offer of comfort and solidarity. Together, we mourned not just the dishes or even the peace of our afternoon, but something deeper. The loss of what our family had once been, the easy love and trust that had seemed unbreakable. In that moment of shared grief, my thoughts turned anxiously towards my younger brother Alex. Known for his fiery temper and fierce protectiveness of our mother, I prayed he would stay away until the storm had passed. The last thing we needed was for him to come home and confront our father in his current state. The potential for violence was too great, the stakes too high. I didn't want this family conflict to escalate into something even more destructive. As we sat there, my mother and I, in the quiet aftermath, a profound sadness settled over me. It was a sadness for her, for all she had to endure. For my father, lost to his bitterness, and for Alex, who should have been spared from adult conflicts. I felt an overwhelming urge to protect them all, to somehow mend the fractures that had splintered through our family's foundation. But as I held my mother, feeling the tremble of her sobs, I knew that some things were beyond my ability to repair. The damage was done, the scars too deep. All I could do was offer my support, my love, and my presence, and hope that somehow, it would be enough to help us navigate through the wreckage of our shared past into a future that, despite everything, I still hoped could hold some measure of peace and reconciliation. The morning after the turmoil at home, I found myself at the coffee shop, mechanically performing my duties but with my mind elsewhere. The image of my father's wrathful destruction and my mother's silent tears haunted me, playing over in my mind like a nightmarish loop. Despite the busy morning rush, a part of me remained disengaged, distant. It was during this haze of distraction that I noticed a familiar figure through the shop's window. My father was outside, walking back and forth along the street, his eyes scanning the faces of passers-by. Unlike his usual disheveled appearance marked by the telltale signs of his drunken escapades, today he was sober, his movements deliberate. The stark difference in his demeanor piqued my curiosity and concern. It wasn't long before I realized he was probably looking for my uncle, the man who had set off the chain of events that had led our family to this precipice. Compelled by a mix of worry and a desperate need to understand, I asked my manager if I could leave work early. Once outside, I kept a cautious distance, trailing behind my father as he continued his seemingly aimless search. After some time, he stopped at a small convenience store to buy a bottle of water. With the bottle in hand, he walked to a quieter part of the street, away from the bustling crowd. There he squatted down and took a swig of water. It was then that I saw a vulnerability in him that I had never witnessed before, 2 lines of tears streaming down his face. Watching him at that moment, I felt a wave of conflicting emotions. Just the day before, he had been a tempest, a force of anger and destruction. Now, he seemed diminished, broken, crying like a child lost in a world too harsh and unforgiving. The sight of his tears, so raw and exposed, stirred in me a profound sadness. I wondered about the immense burden he must be carrying, the sheer weight of betrayal from a family member he had trusted implicitly. I didn't approach him. Instead, I turned away, allowing him his moment of private sorrow, and started the walk home, my own tears blurring my vision as I grappled with the pain of our fractured family. What had we done to deserve such a fate? The question echoed in my mind, each step towards home heavy with the gravity of our collective heartache. On impulse, I decided to take a detour to my grandmother's house. I needed a respite. A moment to gather strength from someone who might understand the depth of what we were facing. My grandmother welcomed me with her usual warmth, her keen eyes quick to see the distress in mine. As we sat together, I shared the events of the past few days, and in turn, she offered me insights into my father that I had not fully appreciated before. She spoke of the land, the piece of earth that had promised so much hope and potential. For my father, that land was not merely an investment, it was a testament to his dedication to providing for his family, a tangible representation of his love and commitment to our future. He had poured not just his money, but his dreams into that soil, dreams of security and prosperity for my sisters and me. It was supposed to be our legacy, a stable and secure foundation upon which we could build our lives. Your father has always wanted the best for you girls, my grandmother said, her voice tinged with emotion. He saw that land as a way to ensure you all had opportunities he never had. Losing it, especially the way we did, broke him more than you might realize. Her words shed light on the depth of my father's despair. It wasn't just anger or betrayal that fueled his actions. It was a profound sense of loss, not only of the land but of his role as our provider, of his identity as the man of the house. The loss had unmoored him, and what we saw, the rage, the helplessness, was his struggle to grapple with this new reality. As I listened to my grandmother, I felt a renewed sense of empathy for my father. Understanding the magnitude of his hopes and how deeply he felt their collapse helped me see past the fury and the broken dishes. It didn't excuse his actions, but it helped explain them, framing his outbursts as cries of pain rather than expressions of inherent cruelty. In the midst of our family's turmoil, as I watched the strain and sadness inflicted upon us by my uncle's deceit and my father's subsequent unraveling, I often found myself wrestling with conflicting emotions about what paths my mother should take. There were moments, many moments, when I felt that the only solution for her, and perhaps for all of us, was to sever ties with my father. The man who once filled our home with laughter and security had become a source of pain and instability. It seemed logical, perhaps even necessary, for her to consider divorce as a viable path to peace. Yet despite my suggestions and perhaps even pleas, my mother never took that step. For a long time, I couldn't understand her decision. To me, it looked like an endless cycle of suffering. My father's bitterness and accusations, his thunderous outbursts that shattered more than just the physical tranquility of our home. It all seemed like too much for any one person to bear, especially someone as gentle as my mother. But as time wore on, and I witnessed more of the complexities of human emotions and the deep-seated bonds of marriage, I began to grasp the possible layers of her choice. My mother, with her enduring patience and almost unfathomable strength, perhaps saw beyond the surface of my father's wrath. Beneath his stormy veneer and the alcohol-fueled tirades, there was another man. A man she had loved and chosen to share her life with. A man who had once been the anchor of our family. She understood the depth of his despair, not just at the financial ruin that had befallen us, but at the profound sense of betrayal by his own brother-in-law, a man he had trusted implicitly. This betrayal had not just robbed him of a piece of land. It had robbed him of his dreams for our family's future, of his pride in providing for us, and of his mental peace. Understanding this, my mother likely felt that abandoning my father in his darkest hour would only add to the tragedy of our situation. Her commitment then, was not just to the man he had become but to the man he once was and, perhaps, could be again. It was a choice of compassion over condemnation, of hope over despair. As for my uncle, the architect of our misfortune, my feelings were far less forgiving. The more I pondered on the devastation he had caused, the more a part of me wished him ill. It was a dark thought, and it shamed me at times. Wishing death upon another person, especially a family member, was a heavy, terrible thing. But in my lowest moments, it seemed a fitting end for someone who had so selfishly dismantled the happiness of his own relatives for his gain. Uncle James had not just stolen money. He had stolen our security, our joy, and our ability to look towards the future with hope rather than despair. The fact that he continued to live comfortably, seemingly indifferent to the chaos he had left in his wake, fueled a bitter fire within me. I imagined him facing some form of cosmic justice, where he would finally understand the full weight of the pain he had caused. Leaving my grandmother's house, I felt fortified by a mixture of love and sorrow. The road to healing our family would be long and uncertain, but armed with this new understanding, I felt slightly better equipped to face the challenges ahead. My father's tears and the wreckage at home were not just signs of what we had lost, but also markers of where we needed to begin rebuilding. As I approached our house, the sight of it no longer filled me with dread, but with a resolve. We were broken, yes, but not beyond repair. With each step, I was making a silent vow to myself and to my family. I would not let our story end here, not in anger and despair. Somehow, we would find a way through the pain, guided by the understanding and love that still lingered beneath the scars, waiting to be rediscovered and nurtured back to life. My partner often shows extreme jealousy and recently became paranoid, believing my new stretch marks were scratches indicating infidelity. My name is Emily, a 24-year-old woman navigating the intricate dance of love and life with my boyfriend Jack, who is 25. We've been together for 3 years, a period marked by highs and lows, laughter and tears, and the steady march towards understanding and trust. Our relationship began in the most unassuming of ways. A chance encounter at a mutual friend's barbecue. I remember the day vividly. The smell of grilled burgers wafting through the air, the sound of laughter and clinking glasses, and the warm summer breeze that seemed to whisper promises of something special. Jack and I were introduced by our friend Sarah, who had been trying to set us up for months. I was initially hesitant, having just come out of a tumultuous relationship, but Jack's easy smile and genuine interest in getting to know me slowly chipped away at my reservations. Our first conversation was about our mutual love for hiking, and it wasn't long before we were planning weekend trips to nearby trails. Those early days were filled with discovery and excitement, the kind of heady rush that comes with new love. Fast forward to the present, and we've settled into a cozy rhythm. We share a modest apartment in the city, a 2-bedroom space that we've made our own with mismatched furniture and walls adorned with photos from our adventures. Jack works as a software developer, a job that keeps him busy but allows for a flexible schedule. I, on the other hand, work as a freelance writer, a career that lets me work from home and be my own boss. Our living situation is comfortable, and though we have our disagreements, we've managed to build a life that feels stable and supportive. Recently, I've been on a personal journey to gain weight. For most of my life, I've struggled with being slightly underweight, a condition that left me feeling self-conscious and often drained my energy. With Jack's encouragement and my own determination, I embarked on a mission to put on some pounds in a healthy way. I started eating more balanced meals, incorporating strength training into my exercise routine, and keeping a close eye on my progress. In a few short months, I managed to gain about 7 pounds, and for the first time in years, I felt a sense of accomplishment when I looked in the mirror. However, this newfound weight came with unexpected changes. My body, adjusting to the rapid increase, began to show signs of stretching skin. Bright red and purple marks appeared on my thighs and buttocks. Stretch marks, a normal but surprising result of my efforts. I did my best to embrace them, reminding myself that they were a testament to my hard work and dedication to improving my health. Jack was supportive, often complimenting me on my progress and reassuring me that the stretch marks were nothing to be ashamed of. A typical day in our lives starts with the soft beep of Jack's alarm clock at 6:30 a.m. He's an early riser, often heading out for a morning run before diving into his work. I usually wake up around 7 a.m., greeted by the aroma of fresh coffee that Jack prepares before leaving for his run. Mornings are my favorite time of day, a quiet period where I can gather my thoughts and plan my tasks. I sit by the window with my coffee, watching the city come to life, and then settle down at my desk to write. Jack returns from his run around 8 a.m., sweaty but invigorated. We have breakfast together, a simple meal of eggs and toast, sometimes accompanied by a smoothie. Our conversations during breakfast are a mix of work plans, random musings, and shared jokes. After breakfast, Jack heads to his home office, and I return to my writing. The next few hours are spent in productive silence, punctuated by the occasional query or shared snippet from our respective tasks. By lunchtime, we both need a break. We usually eat together, taking the time to reconnect and discuss our progress. Afternoons are a bit more relaxed. Jack might have a few video calls, while I take a walk to clear my head or run some errands. Evenings are our time. We cook dinner together, experiment with new recipes, or indulge in our favorite comfort foods. After dinner, we might watch a movie, play a board game, or simply talk about our day. It's a routine that we've grown accustomed to, a comforting pattern that reinforces our bond. On the day everything changed, our routine started as usual. Jack had gone for his morning run, and I was enjoying my coffee by the window. The sky was a pale blue, streaked with the golden hues of dawn. Birds chirped outside, adding a melodic backdrop to the quiet of our apartment. I relished these moments of solitude, savoring the warmth of the coffee mug in my hands and the peacefulness of the early hour. I had planned to spend the day working on a new article about sustainable living practices, a topic I was passionate about. My notes were spread out on the desk, ready for me to dive into once I finished my coffee. Jack, meanwhile, had a series of meetings lined up for the day. He worked from home most of the time, his job as a software developer allowing him the flexibility to be present, even if his mind was often absorbed in code and algorithms. The morning passed without incident. Jack returned from his run, flushed and energized, and we enjoyed a hearty breakfast together. We talked about our plans for the day and shared a few laughs over a funny video I had found online. After breakfast, we retreated to our respective workspaces. I immersed myself in my writing, the hours slipping by as I crafted sentences and organized my thoughts. By noon the sun was high in the sky, casting a warm glow through the windows. We met for lunch, as we always did, a small ritual that helped us stay connected despite our busy schedules. Jack had made sandwiches, and we sat at the kitchen table, chatting about our work and upcoming plans. It was during this light-hearted conversation about an upcoming trip to the mountains that Jack first noticed the marks. We had been planning this trip for weeks, eager to escape the hustle and bustle of city life and reconnect with nature. I was excitedly talking about the hiking trails and the cozy cabin we had booked when I noticed Jack's gaze drift downward. "Emily, what are those marks on your butt?" he asked, his tone a mix of curiosity and concern. I glanced down, momentarily confused before realizing he had noticed the stretch marks that had recently appeared. I felt a flush of embarrassment but quickly composed myself. "Oh, those are just stretch marks," I replied, trying to keep my tone casual. "I've been gaining some weight, remember? It's just my skin adjusting." Jack's frown deepened. "They don't look like stretch marks. They look more like scratches." His words hung in the air, heavy with unspoken accusations. I felt a pang of frustration and sadness. "Jack, they're stretch marks. They might look red and angry now, but that's just because they're new. They come from underneath the skin, not from the outside." Michael's eyes narrowed slightly as he examined them, but his expression remained unreadable. The room, once filled with the lightness of a leisurely day, now seemed to close in on us with a tangible tension. He stared at me, his expression a mix of disbelief and confusion. "Are you sure? They really don't look like stretch marks to me." I nodded, trying to stay calm. "Yes, I'm sure. You can even look it up if you want. Stretch marks can look different on different people, but that's what they are." "Are you accusing me of lying?" I asked, the hurt clear in my voice. It was the first time in our 3-year relationship that I felt a chasm of mistrust opening between us. He didn't respond immediately. Instead, his eyes shifted away from me, fixing on the floor as if it held the answer he needed. Without a word, tears welled up in his eyes, an unusual sight for Michael, who always prided himself on his composure. I reached out to touch his arm, but he gently pulled away and left the room, leaving me alone with a mix of emotions swirling inside me. The sound of the front door closing echoed through the apartment, marking his departure as clearly as it shattered the peace of our day. The hours that followed were long and heavy. I sat on the edge of the bed, the indentations of his fingers still visible on my skin, replaying the conversation over and over in my mind. I couldn't understand where his sudden doubt had stemmed from. Had I missed signs of his insecurities before this? My thoughts spiraled, touching each memory, trying to find evidence of mistrust I might have overlooked. When Michael finally returned, the sun had begun to set, casting long shadows across the room that seemed to echo the darkness settling between us. I knew we needed to talk, to clear the air, or the gap that had opened up would only widen. "I want to talk about earlier," I started as soon as I saw him. He nodded, his face weary, his usual bright eyes dimmed. We sat down together, the space on the couch between us feeling like a gulf. "Do you have any reason not to trust me, or do you need reassurance or more attention in our relationship?" I asked, my voice soft but firm. It was crucial to understand his perspective, even if his suspicions had hurt me deeply. He stayed silent for a long time, his eyes not meeting mine. When he finally spoke, his voice was low. "No, but those marks, they don't make sense," he admitted, sounding as confused as he was uncertain. Trying to bridge the distance between us, I offered. "You can go through my phone whenever you want to," hoping transparency would reassure him. "Maybe you should talk to one of your friends about it," I added, thinking that perhaps external support might help him process his feelings better than I could alone. But he didn't like that suggestion. His face closed off, and he stood abruptly. "I don't need to talk to anyone," he said sharply, then stormed off to the other room, leaving me once again alone, the weight of our unresolved conflict pressing down on me like a physical force. We had not spoken since. As the door slammed shut behind Michael, the sharp sound seemed to cleave the air, leaving a palpable silence that settled heavily around me. Left alone in the diminishing light of the evening, I felt a cold draft sweep through the room, as if the open window was allowing the chill from outside to seep into the apartment, and into the spaces between us. In the quiet that followed, my mind began to whirl with thoughts and emotions. Shock was the first to settle in, thick and suffocating. I never imagined that Michael, the person I trusted most in the world, could suggest, even indirectly, that I might be unfaithful. The absurdity of his accusation that my stretch marks were scratches from someone else's nails was bewildering. Confusion followed close behind the shock. Why would Michael think such a thing? We had always been open with each other, sharing our thoughts and feelings without hesitation. This level of mistrust was new, alien. I replayed our conversation in my head, his words echoing, "They don't look like stretch marks." And I could feel a tinge of frustration bubbling inside me. How could he not trust my words? Sitting on the edge of our bed, the dim light of the bedside lamp casting long shadows across the room, I allowed my mind to drift to previous instances that might have hinted at this sudden burst of jealousy. There was that time at a company party when I had laughed a little too long at a coworker's joke, and I noticed Michael's eyes narrow across the room. Or when he had asked, with a thinly veiled tension, who I was texting late one evening when it was only my sister sharing updates about her new baby. Each memory, each little moment I could recall, seemed now like a thread in a larger tapestry I had not seen the whole of. Was there always an undercurrent of doubt that I had failed to notice? Or was this insecurity something new, something brought on by circumstances I could not understand? Feeling overwhelmed, I reached for my phone. I dialed my best friend, Sarah, needing the comfort of her voice, the reassurance of her perspective. She answered on the second ring, her voice a soothing balm to my frayed nerves. "Hey, what's up? You sound upset," she said, her tone immediately shifting to concern. I poured out the events of the day, my words tumbling out in a rush. As I spoke, I could hear Sarah's steady breathing on the other end of the line, a reminder of the calm I was desperately seeking. "That sounds really tough, but you know, Michael might just be going through something he's not ready to talk about," Sarah offered, always the voice of reason. "But it's also important that he knows he can't project his insecurities onto you." Her words were rational, but they only provided a small comfort against the torrent of emotions I felt. After we hung up, the loneliness crept back, heavier than before. The anxiety started to set in then, gnawing at the edges of my mind. What if Michael's doubts had roots deeper than just the misunderstandings of today? What if these seeds of mistrust grew into something more, something that could not be mended? The thought made my heart race, and I felt a profound sadness at the potential loss of something so dear. I felt misunderstood, isolated in my own relationship. It was as if Michael and I were suddenly speaking different languages, unable to understand each other's words, let alone our feelings. The realization was crushing. The emotional toll was more exhausting than I had anticipated. Sleep eluded me as I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, the shadows seeming to mock my distress. Each time I closed my eyes, I saw Michael's tearful eyes, heard the disbelief in his voice, felt the growing distance between us. The sadness was a heavy cloak I couldn't seem to shed, and I missed him terribly, even though he was just in the next room. As dawn broke, the first light of morning casting a pale glow into the room, I knew something had to change. I couldn't let this misunderstanding fester and poison what we had built together. But as I prepared to face the day, to face Michael, the weight of uncertainty was a constant companion, making each step feel like wading through treacle. The house felt silent and cold when Michael finally came back. It was as if his departure had taken the warmth with him, and now his return brought back not the comfort of his presence, but the shadow of our unresolved issues. I had been sitting at the kitchen table, pretending to be absorbed in a book, but really, my mind had been racing with thoughts about our conversation, about his accusations, and about the future of our relationship. When I heard the door open, my heart skipped. I closed the book and stood up, smoothing my sweater, not sure what to expect. Would he apologize? Or would he continue to doubt me? The uncertainty was gnawing at me. "Michael," I called out as he entered the kitchen. He paused, his eyes meeting mine briefly before looking away. He looked tired. His usual bright eyes were clouded with something I couldn't quite decipher. Frustration, confusion, sorrow. "We need to talk," I said, my voice more steady than I felt. He nodded silently, hanging his coat on the rack and reluctantly joining me at the table. We sat across from each other, the tension thick in the air. "Michael, I want to understand why you felt the way you did today," I began, trying to keep my tone neutral. "Do you have any reasons to distrust me, or is there something else that's bothering you? Do you need more reassurance or more attention from me in our relationship?" He looked at his hands for a long moment before responding. His voice, when he finally spoke, was barely above a whisper. "I don't know, it's just, those marks, They caught me off guard. I trust you, but I couldn't make sense of them. They don't look like what I thought stretch marks looked like. I listened quietly, keeping my emotions in check. I understand that it was unexpected, but you know I've been trying to gain weight. The doctor said rapid weight gain could cause stretch marks like these. But something had shifted in Michael. Instead of acknowledging the explanation, his face darkened, and his words became harsh, sharp like shards of glass. No, this doesn't make sense. Who have you been with? He shouted, his voice escalating as he began to list names. Male colleagues, friends, even distant acquaintances. Each name felt like an accusation, a wound. I stood there, stunned into silence for a moment, my heart pounding in my chest. Michael, stop. Why would you say those things? Tears began to form, blurring my vision as I heard him continue. Not just questioning my fidelity, but now attacking my profession. He didn't stop there. His anger spilled over to everything connected to me. My friends, my parents. And what about your so-called supportive friends? What role do they play in this? He spat out, each word laced with venom. I felt my own anger rising, hot and fierce. How dare you? I cried out, my voice cracking. The hurt was overwhelming. I was shaking, sobbing loudly, the tears streaming down my face. But he seemed lost to his rage, unable to see the pain he was inflicting, his suspicions spiraling out of control. The apartment, our home, felt like it was closing in on me, the walls echoing with the destructive force of his accusations. I watched, heartbroken, as he swept his arm across the coffee table, sending books and small trinkets crashing to the floor. His behavior was unlike anything I had ever seen from him. It scared me, seeing him like this, consumed by baseless jealousy. Michael, please, this isn't you. I pleaded between sobs, trying to reach out to him, to pull him back from the edge of this rage-filled precipice. But he was beyond my reach, his words slicing through the last threads of my composure. Finally, I couldn't bear it any longer. If you can't trust me, if you can't respect me, then what are we even doing? I shouted, my voice hoarse from crying. You need help, Michael, but so do I. We can't go on like this. Silence fell as my words hung in the air. He stopped, his chest heaving, looking around at the chaos he had caused, at the woman he claimed to love now crying uncontrollably because of his actions. It seemed to dawn on him then, the gravity of what had just unfolded between us. The moment was a painful wake-up call, a stark revelation of how deeply our trust had been eroded and how much healing would be necessary if there was any hope for us to move forward. Whether that path would be one we could walk together remained to be seen. The update. As I sat alone in the dim light of our living room, the shadows seemed to stretch across the walls, mirroring the darkening thoughts swirling in my mind. The echoes of Michael's angry words hung heavy in the air, a stark reminder of the storm that had just passed. He had stormed out again, leaving behind a silence that was thick with unrest and sorrow. This wasn't the first time jealousy had reared its ugly head in our relationship, but tonight, it had turned into sheer madness. Over the past year, I had noticed a troubling pattern in Michael's behavior. It started with small, seemingly insignificant comments about how I dressed for work or the occasional coffee with a friend. But gradually, these comments had morphed into accusations, heated arguments that would end in his tearful apologies and promises to change. Each time I believed him, hoping our love was strong enough to overcome these bouts of insecurity. But as I replayed those moments now, a chilling realization washed over me. It was getting worse, not better. Tonight had been different. The intensity of his anger, the sharpness of his words, everything was magnified. He hadn't just been upset or confused, he had been furious, destructive. The apartment bore the physical marks of his rage, with shattered glass from a picture frame we had picked out together last Christmas lying scattered across the floor like fragments of our once happy memories. As I gathered the broken pieces, my mind raced with questions and fears about our future. Could I continue living like this, walking on eggshells, always anxious about what might set him off next? Was love really supposed to be this hard, this painful? My thoughts were interrupted by the sound of the front door. Michael was back, his face pale and his eyes red-rimmed from crying. He looked broken, remorseful. For a moment, my heart ached for him, for us. But then I remembered the fear, the feeling of helplessness as he had yelled and thrown things around, accusing me of betraying him over innocuous stretch marks that were merely the result of my efforts to be healthier. We need to talk, I said firmly as he stepped closer, his expression one of contrition. I know, I'm so sorry, he stammered, his voice cracking. I don't know what got into me. It's just, seeing those marks, it scared me. I thought I was losing you. His words pierced me with a sadness so deep it was almost physical. Michael, Your jealousy isn't new. It's been building up, and every time, it chips away a little more of my trust, my sense of safety with you. I love you, but I can't live like this. We can't keep going through these cycles. He nodded, swallowing hard. I know I need help. I'll do anything. See a therapist. Anything you need. Please. Don't give up on us. But as much as I wanted to believe him, the fear of what might happen if we stayed together haunted me. What if his jealousy turned even more destructive? What if next time, he didn't just break things but broke us beyond repair? I need to think, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. I need some space to figure out what's best for us, for me. I'm scared, Michael. I'm scared of what you might do, what you might think of me. That you might believe I betrayed you even if we just break up. He looked devastated, but he nodded, understanding the gravity of the situation. Okay, I'll stay at my brother's tonight. Take all the time you need, he replied, his tone resigned. After he left, the silence returned, but now it was a silence of solitude, not of anticipation. I pondered over everything, our love, the good times we had shared, and the darkness that had slowly enveloped us. I wondered if ending things would lead him to think I had someone else, if it would prompt him to do something drastic out of a misguided sense of betrayal. The decision lay heavily on me. Continuing as we were was untenable, but the implications of ending things were frightening in their own right. Either choice carried its own set of fears and potential regrets. I realized then that the most immediate need was not just deciding whether to stay or leave, but ensuring both our safeties, emotional and physical. Perhaps a mediated conversation with a therapist present, or a clear safety plan, would be the first steps. Ending a relationship scared me, but continuing in fear scared me more. As the night deepened, so did my resolve. Tomorrow I would call a counselor, someone who could guide us through this, whether it ended in reconciliation or separation. But tonight, I would allow myself to grieve. The loss of the relationship I thought we had. The future I had imagined, and the peace I so desperately craved. My husband forced me to get sterilized. Even though he knew my health would be at risk after the procedure and he did not consider getting sterilized himself. My name is Emily, and I'm 32 years old. My story, though woven with love, is also stitched with pains and decisions that were never easy. My husband Ethan, who is now 37, has been the anchor in my life for over a decade. We met when we were both just stepping out into the world, me, a fledgling graphic designer, and he, a budding financial analyst. Our love story wasn't a whirlwind, but rather a gentle, steady flame that lit up the darker corners of our lives. We married young, full of hopes and shared dreams, and this year marks our 11th anniversary. Together we've created a world filled with more than just shared assets and memories. We've brought into this world two beautiful souls, our children. Our first, a boisterous 7-year-old named Lucas, has the spirit of an explorer, his eyes reflecting the boundless energy that only a child possesses. Our latest joy, baby Ava, just arrived into this world, her presence a testament to both love and resilience. Resilience, a term that has defined more of my life than I ever anticipated. You see, my body harbors a secret, one that belies the outward normalcy of my family life. I have a rare complicating medical condition that transforms pregnancy into a perilous journey. After Lucas, doctors advised against another pregnancy, warning of the severe risks. Yet Ethan and I yearned for another child to complete our family. We braved the storm once more with Ava, but not without consequence. The decision for Ava to be our last was mutual and firm. My body could not withstand another pregnancy. Weeks before Ava was due, my doctor presented an option. One that seemed practical against the backdrop of my medical risks: sterilization. They would be opening me up anyway for a C-section. It seemed opportune. Ethan was supportive when I brought it up. It seemed a straightforward choice in our complicated situation. However, as practical as it sounded, hesitation gnawed at me. Sterilization felt so final. Yet the risk of another pregnancy loomed larger than my fears. I remember sitting with Ethan one cool evening, the sunset painting the sky in hues of orange and pink, discussing the future of our family. It was then, with a heavy heart but a clear mind, that I agreed. We decided together, or so I thought, that this chapter of our lives was to end with my upcoming surgery. We signed off on it, a decision etched in medical records in our hearts. Life has its moments of pure joy and harrowing trials, and often they are intertwined so closely that one cannot untangle them without altering the very fabric of one's existence. This realization hit me, full force as I entered the 37th week of my pregnancy with our second child Ava. Ethan and I had been on cloud 9, preparing to welcome our new baby, believing we had a plan in place that addressed all our concerns, including the daunting notion of sterilization that lingered in the back of my mind. However, that week something felt ominously amiss. It was a typical Tuesday evening. Ethan was reading a bedtime story to Lucas, and I was organizing baby clothes for Ava when a sharp pain seized my abdomen. The pain quickly escalated beyond the usual discomforts of late pregnancy. Frightened, I called out to Ethan, my voice threading through the calmness of our home like a sudden storm. Within hours we were in the sterile, buzzing environment of the emergency room. My doctor, Dr. Reynolds, a kind yet straightforward professional, explained that I was experiencing a significant placental abruption, a serious condition where the placenta detaches from the uterus prematurely. The risk to Ava was immediate and dire, and there was no choice but to proceed with an emergency C-section. As they wheeled me into the operating room, my thoughts were chaotic, oscillating between concern for my baby and the stark realization that any plans for concurrent sterilization would be shelved. Emergency C-sections, as Dr. Reynolds explained in those terse, tension-filled moments, focus solely on the immediate preservation of life. Mine and Ava's. The luxury of integrating a sterilization procedure was impractical and unsafe under such rushed and critical circumstances. Post-delivery, while I held Ava for the first time, relief washing over me in gentle, grateful waves, Dr. Reynolds came to discuss the next steps. Ava was healthy, her cries a vigorous affirmation of life. But the conversation quickly turned sober. The doctor informed me that the window for an opportune sterilization had closed abruptly with the emergency nature of the C-section. Now the path forward was fraught with complications. "Emily," Dr. Reynolds began, her voice a blend of empathy and clinical detachment. "The surgery went well, but we couldn't perform the sterilization. It's imperative we revisit this soon. Your condition makes any future pregnancy exceedingly dangerous. I advise against delaying this procedure longer than necessary." She detailed the interim measures. A rigorous regime of contraceptives that felt daunting in its intensity and scope. Triple-layered contraceptive strategies were now essential until sterilization could be safely revisited. This was not just a suggestion, it was a medical imperative. As I listened, the weight of her words settled around me like a heavy cloak. Sterilization wasn't just a choice anymore, it was a necessity shadowed by the urgency of my recent brush with a life-threatening situation. Yet despite the clear medical advice, a part of me felt adrift, caught in a storm of what-ifs and the silent stoic resistance from Ethan about revisiting his stance on the matter. The room, filled with the soft coos and gentle rustling of our newborn, felt paradoxically both full of life and laden with unspoken tensions. As I cradled Ava, her tiny hand gripping my finger with innocent trust, the complexity of my emotions mirrored the intricacies of the life I held in my arms. This moment was both an end and a beginning, and the road ahead promised to be as challenging as it was necessary. The arrival of Ethan's grandmother, Mrs. Harper, coincided with a period of recovery and adjustment for our family. Her presence, typically a source of wisdom and comfort, this time brought with it a gust of contention that swept through our already tumultuous situation. Mrs. Harper, a stern yet loving matriarch, had come to meet her great-granddaughter Ava and check on my well-being. As we gathered in the living room, the atmosphere thick with the sense of freshly brewed tea and concern, she observed quietly before finally voicing a thought that pierced the veneer of normalcy we had tried so hard to maintain. "Ethan," she began, her voice firm and cutting through the mundane chatter. "Emily has given you two beautiful children, endured major surgeries for your family. Why don't you consider getting the sterilization surgery instead?" Her suggestion hung in the air, palpable and heavy. It seemed to draw all the energy in the room towards itself, and for a moment, silence enveloped us. Ethan's face tightened, the muscles in his jaw working silently. I felt a mix of shock and relief. Shock that she had voiced such a private issue so openly, and relief that someone had finally mirrored my own unspoken thoughts. The following day the conversation continued, albeit under a very different guise. We were visited by Claire, the midwife who had been a pillar of support throughout my last trimester and during the emergency delivery. Mrs. Harper, never one to shy away from difficult conversations, steered the discussion towards the topic of sterilization again. Claire, understanding the sensitivity yet the importance of the subject, took a gentle approach. She explained the nuances of sterilization procedures for men and women, highlighting that a vasectomy was a simpler, less invasive procedure compared to a tubal ligation, which I was considering. Vasectomies typically require less recovery time, involve less risk, and are often completely reversible, she detailed. On the other hand, tubal ligation, especially after the kind of surgeries Emily has already undergone, presents a higher risk and a longer recovery period. These clinical details added a layer of harsh reality to the discussion. It underscored not just the physical burden I had shouldered but also the disparity in what Ethan was being asked to consider. Despite the clarity and logic presented by Claire, Ethan's reaction was swift and visceral. He dismissed the idea almost immediately, his words a blend of discomfort and finality. "It's different for a man," he stated flatly. his voice devoid of the warmth I had grown accustomed to in our years together. "I won't do it." We agreed Emily would handle it. And that's what should happen. His insistence stung, a bitter pill coated in the familiar guise of marital discord. It wasn't just his words but the unyielding tone that felt like a barricade rising between us. Here, in the soft light of our home, with our newborn daughter cradled in my arms, I felt a distance opening between Ethan and me that was about more than just physical space. It was about the unseen sacrifices, the silent aches, and the shared burdens that suddenly felt all too one-sided. As Ethan stood firm on his stance, the room seemed smaller, the walls echoing with the weight of decisions yet unmade and conversations that spiraled into silent disagreements. Mrs. Harper watched us, her eyes shadowed with concern, perhaps regretting the ripple her words had caused. But her intervention had been a catalyst, unveiling the often unspoken expectations placed on women, on mothers, and on wives. In the quiet moments when Ava slept and the world seemed to pause just briefly enough for reflection, my thoughts often wandered down paths lined with uncertainty and discomfort. The discussion, or rather the lack of it, about sterilization had not just opened a rift but had begun to feel like a chasm between Ethan and me. It was during these quiet hours that doubts began to gnaw at me, more persistent and unsettling each time. I couldn't shake the feeling of unfairness that clung to me like a second skin. My body bore the marks of our shared journey, scars from 2 C-sections, and the hidden wounds from years of battling hyperemesis gravidarum, a condition that made each pregnancy a trial of endurance against near-constant nausea and dehydration. The physical toll was visible, palpable in every slow movement and tired smile. But it was the emotional toll that weighed most heavily on me during these solitary reflections. Why was my suffering the default option? The surgeries, the recoveries, the endless days and nights of physical and emotional drain. Hadn't I endured enough? The thought that Ethan might be keeping his options open, preserving his ability to have more children in the future with someone else if our paths ever diverged, was a seed of doubt that sprouted bitter roots. This wasn't just about what was practical, it felt increasingly like what was fair, and what was not. These thoughts often crystallized into sharp, jagged fears late at night, when Ethan and I would lie side by side in bed, an ocean of unspoken words flowing between us. I would turn over in my mind the conversations we should have been having. "Do you think it's fair, Ethan?" I imagined asking him. "Do you think it's just, that after all my body has gone through, I should be the one to face surgery again?" But these conversations remained imaginary. Whenever I broached the subject, Ethan's responses were curt, his discomfort manifesting as a refusal to engage. "We've already decided this, Emily," he would say, his tone final, leaving no room for the discussions I so desperately needed. His avoidance felt like a wall, cold and unyielding, and each dismissal only served to heighten the sense of isolation within me. The rift widened one evening as we faced each other across the kitchen, a space that had once been filled with laughter and shared cooking experiments, now reduced to a battleground of silent meals and colder glances. "Why won't you even talk about it, Ethan?" I found myself pressing, unable to keep the frustration from my voice. "Don't you see how much I've already gone through?" He looked at me, his face a mask of stoicism. "It's different for men," he repeated. His favorite defense, one that felt more like an evasion with every utterance. His refusal to discuss his reasons left me grappling with shadows, fighting an invisible opponent in a battle I hadn't chosen. The sense of injustice grew, festering like a wound that wouldn't heal. Each of Ethan's dismissals felt like a denial of all that I had endured for our family. It wasn't just about the physical acts of bearing children or undergoing surgeries, it was about the shared commitment I believed marriage was supposed to represent. How could he not see that this was about more than logistics or recovery times? It was about respect, about mutual sacrifice, and about recognizing the weight each partner carries in their own way. As these discussions turned into arguments, and arguments lapsed back into silence, the emotional distance between us began to mirror the physical one. We moved around each other like celestial bodies bound by the same orbit but existing in entirely separate worlds. The heartache of this growing divide was palpable, a constant ache that pulsed in time with my own heartbeat. I feared not only for the future of my health but for the foundation of our marriage. Was this how it would be now, a series of negotiations about who bore the burdens and who sidestepped them? As I watched Ethan retreat behind his wall of silence, I felt a resolve hardening within me. This was not just a fight for fairness in our marriage. It was a fight for my voice to be heard, for my sacrifices to be acknowledged, and for a partnership that truly shared both the joys and the pains of the life we had built together. As the rift between Ethan and me deepened, the silence in our home grew heavier, almost tangible in its presence. With each passing day the divide seemed to solidify, turning from a crack into a chasm. Desperate for some semblance of understanding, I reached out to our mutual friend Dr. Lisa Martin, who was also a seasoned counselor. Ethan had always respected her, and I clung to the hope that her involvement might steer us back toward common ground. Sitting in Lisa's office, the comforting familiarity of the setting felt stark against the turmoil of my emotions. I unfolded our story with a quiet urgency, detailing the surgeries, the physical toll of my pregnancies, and the unresolved conversations about sterilization. The words spilled out, each one laden with the weariness of carrying this burden alone. Lisa listened with her characteristic calm, her nods and gentle prompts encouraging me to explore not just the events, but the feelings intertwined with them. I spoke of my exhaustion, the unfairness I felt, and the growing fear that Ethan's refusal to consider sterilization was not just about avoiding surgery but perhaps about keeping his options open, options that didn't include me. "Let's bring Ethan into the conversation," Lisa suggested gently, proposing a joint session to explore these fears openly. It was a logical step, one necessary to mend or at least understand the fractures in our relationship. The evening that Ethan joined me at Lisa's office was fraught with a tension that seemed to thicken the air around us. We sat across from each other, both of us encased in our apprehensions, our defenses palpable. Lisa facilitated the conversation with tact, but no amount of mediation could veil the stark discomfort Ethan displayed. As the session unfolded, it became evident that our perspectives were not just misaligned but perhaps irreconcilable. When prompted to share his views, Ethan's responses were terse, his tone defensive. "I just think it makes more sense for you to do it," he repeated, his words echoing the many times we'd circled this argument at home. I tried to convey the depth of my exhaustion and fear, the physical and emotional toll it had taken, and how his insistence felt like a dismissal of all that I had endured. "Don't you see how much I've already gone through?" I implored, hoping to breach the walls of his resolve. Ethan's rebuttal was a blend of frustration and finality. "I'm just not comfortable with the idea of surgery on me. It's different," he stated, shutting down further discussion. His unwillingness to delve deeper into his reasons, or to genuinely consider my plight, left a cold realization in its wake. As the session drew to a close, it was clear that no resolution lay on this path. The counseling had not been the bridge I had hoped for but rather a mirror, reflecting the stark reality of our disconnect. We left Lisa's office with a polite goodbye, the air between us thick with unspoken acknowledgments of a future increasingly in doubt. In the days that followed, our home life resumed its routine, a facade of normalcy that fooled neither of us. The unresolved issue of sterilization loomed large, a symbol of the broader disparities in our marriage. My health, both physical and emotional, continued to bear the brunt of this impasse. As I grappled with the fallout, the realization that perhaps not all chapters in our lives could conclude with mutual understanding began to settle in. The strain on our marriage was palpable, each interaction tinged with the residue of our failed negotiations. It seemed at last that some distances grew too vast to bridge, and some wounds too deep to heal within the confines of a relationship strained beyond its limits. This growing acknowledgement didn't come with relief but with a profound sense of grief. For the partnership we could not salvage, and the future we would not share. The resolution, when it finally came, was not one of reconciliation, but of resignation. A quiet, painful acceptance of our divergent paths. A month has slipped by, and the silence between Ethan and me has settled into our home like a thick fog, chilling and pervasive. We move around each other like ghosts, haunting the spaces we once filled with laughter and conversation. The touch, once a source of comfort and connection, has now become something I recoil from. His attempts to bridge the gap with a gentle caress on my arm or a tentative kiss on the forehead meeting the stone wall of my withdrawal. His earlier stance, marked by what I felt was profound selfishness, has pushed me to this point. Yet despite the Cold War that delineates our interactions, the thought of divorce slices through me with terror. I can't bear to think of our two children, Lucas and Ava, navigating the aftermath of a broken family. The idea of them having to split their lives between two homes, to see their father's presence reduced to weekends or holidays, is more than I can stand. The stability of their world, so dearly bought, weighs heavily against the hurt that now colors my days. I'm stuck in this limbo, caught between my hurt and the potential upheaval a separation could cause our children. How do I move forward from here? How do I resolve a matter that seems to have no clear path to peace? The narrative of Emily and Ethan provides profound insights into the complexities of love, responsibility, selfishness, and sacrifice in relationships, particularly when strained by significant health and ethical decisions. Love in any meaningful relationship requires flexibility and understanding. It's not only about affection and compatibility but also about adapting and responding to the challenges and needs of one's partner. The story highlights how Ethan's inflexibility regarding the decision on sterilization led to a breakdown in understanding, showing that love needs to be accommodating and responsive to thrive. Responsibility within a marriage extends beyond individual desires, encompassing the welfare of the entire family. Emily's contemplation of both her health and the emotional well-being of her children exemplifies a deep sense of responsibility. It shows that responsible decisions support the stability and happiness of all family members, not just the individual making the choice. Selfishness, as demonstrated by Ethan's refusal to consider an alternative approach to sterilization, can undermine the mutual respect that is foundational to any partnership. His insistence on Emily undergoing surgery, despite her extensive medical history and associated risks, highlights how prioritizing personal comfort over a partner's well-being can erode trust and respect. In any balanced relationship, sacrifices should be shared. The narrative underscores the toll that unreciprocated sacrifices can take on a person's health and emotional state. When both partners are willing to make sacrifices, it strengthens their bond and fosters a true sense of partnership, which was missing in Emily and Ethan's interactions. The story also emphasizes the importance of communication in resolving conflicts. The lack of open dialogue between Emily and Ethan only worsened their situation, illustrating that effective communication is crucial for understanding each other's perspectives and finding common ground. Sometimes, internal efforts to resolve disputes are insufficient, as evident from Emily and Ethan's failure to reconcile their differences alone. Seeking external help, such as from counselors or therapists, can offer new perspectives and facilitate constructive discussions, providing essential guidance for couples struggling with similar issues. Lastly, the decisions made in a relationship have long-term implications that go beyond the immediate circumstances. They affect the future emotional and physical health of both partners and their children. This story serves as a reminder of the need for compassion, compromise and courage in facing tough decisions together, ensuring that the relationship nurtures mutual respect and shared sacrifices. This narrative teaches that the interplay between personal desires and shared responsibilities is delicate and requires careful consideration to maintain the health and happiness of a relationship. What do you think about the story? Please leave your comments below. Thank you for taking the time to listen to the entire story. I shot an adult scene when I was 18, and my husband recently discovered the video on the internet. My name is Laura. 20 years ago, when I was a reckless and naive 18-year-old, I made a mistake that has haunted me ever since. Now at 38, I am a different person altogether. Mature, responsible, and deeply in love with my family. Yet the shadow of that one impulsive decision looms large over my otherwise perfect life. I wake up every morning next to my husband, James, who is the love of my life. We have been married for 15 years, and each day, I am reminded of how incredibly lucky I am to have him by my side. James is my rock, my confidant, and my best friend. He knows me better than anyone else, or so he believes. Our two beautiful children, Emily and Noah, are the light of our lives. Their laughter fills our home with joy, and watching them grow has been the greatest privilege of my life. Our life together is the epitome of happiness. We live in a cozy suburban house with a white picket fence, a dog named Max, and a garden that James tends to with a passion. Our weekends are filled with soccer games, ballet recitals, and family movie nights. On the surface, everything is perfect. But deep down, there is a secret that I have carried with me for 2 decades. A secret that could shatter this idyllic existence if it ever came to light. 20 years ago, I was just an 18-year-old girl, fresh out of high school and eager to experience the world. I had a close-knit group of friends, but none was as dear to me as Lisa. We had been inseparable since middle school, and I trusted her completely. Lisa was adventurous and bold, always pushing the boundaries and encouraging me to do the same. It was her idea to take a trip to Los Angeles, the city of dreams, where anything seemed possible. Lisa had always been fascinated by the entertainment industry. She was convinced that her path to fame and fortune lay somewhere within the glitz and glamour of Hollywood. When she told me about an opportunity to shoot an adult scene, I was shocked. But Lisa, with her persuasive charm, convinced me that it was a quick way to make some money and maybe even get noticed by someone important in the industry. I went with her to the studio for moral support. The place was a far cry from the glamorous sets we had imagined. It was dingy and impersonal, a stark contrast to the bright lights and red carpets of our dreams. Lisa seemed nervous, a side of her I hadn't seen before. Just before she was supposed to go on, she chickened out, her face pale with fear. She begged me to step in for her, promising that it would be quick and that we could leave right after. I hesitated. This wasn't something I had ever imagined doing. But Lisa was my best friend, and I didn't want to let her down. So, with a heavy heart and a sense of impending regret, I agreed. The scene itself was a blur. I remember the harsh lights, the coldness of the set, and the impersonal nature of the entire experience. The man I was paired with was professional but distant, his presence adding to my discomfort. I put on a brave face, but inside, I felt a mix of shame, fear, and disbelief. As soon as it was over, I wanted to disappear. Lisa was waiting for me, her face a mixture of relief and gratitude. We left the studio in silence, the weight of what had just happened hanging heavily between us. I couldn't shake the feeling of regret that settled in my stomach like a stone. That night, I cried myself to sleep, wishing I could turn back time and make a different choice. Days turned into weeks, and I tried to put the incident behind me. But then, the video appeared on the internet. It was the early days of file-sharing servers, and the video quickly made its rounds. Every time I saw a new link or heard someone mention it, my heart would race with fear. I dreaded the thought of someone recognizing me, of my parents finding out, or worse, of my future being tainted by this one mistake. Surprisingly, no one I knew seemed to come across the video. It was as if I had been granted a small mercy. Slowly, the video seemed to fade into obscurity, buried beneath the avalanche of new content constantly being uploaded. I allowed myself to hope that it had disappeared for good. Lisa and I drifted apart after that summer. Our friendship couldn't withstand the strain of what had happened. I enrolled in college, determined to build a new life for myself, far away from the shadows of that mistake. I met my husband a few years later. He was kind, loving, and everything I had ever hoped for in a partner. I never told him about the video. It was a part of my past that I wanted to forget, and I prayed he would never find out. For years, I lived with the secret, always fearful that it might resurface. I would occasionally search for it online, holding my breath each time, but it never appeared. I began to believe that maybe, just maybe, I had been given a second chance. When I met James a few years later, I was determined to leave that part of my life behind. I never told him about the video. He knew I had a wild past, and he accepted it, but this was the one thing I couldn't bring myself to confess. As our relationship blossomed into love and eventually marriage, my silence on the matter became a heavy burden. Each day, I prayed that he would never find out, that the video would stay hidden forever. For years my fears remained unfounded. Life went on, and I immersed myself in the roles of wife and mother. But the anxiety never truly left me. It was a typical Wednesday afternoon when my world came crashing down. I had just finished tidying up the kitchen after lunch, my mind already drifting to the tasks I needed to complete for the day. As I sipped my coffee, I decided to take a quick break and catch up on some news. Absent-mindedly, I began to scroll through my phone. For some reason, perhaps a gut feeling or sheer paranoia, I decided to check one of the popular adult sites. It was a habit I had developed over the years, a way to reassure myself that the video had remained buried. But this time, as I scrolled through the site, my heart stopped. There it was, staring back at me from the screen. The thumbnail image was unmistakable. My heart pounded in my chest, and my hands trembled as I clicked on the link. The video loaded, and I saw my 18-year-old self, frozen in time, making the biggest mistake of my life. A wave of nausea washed over me, and I had to sit down to keep from collapsing. Seeing it again brought back all the feelings of shame and regret that I had tried so hard to bury. The fear of my husband discovering it, of my children being taunted by it, was almost too much to bear. I felt like that 18-year-old girl again, scared and desperate for a way out. I knew I had to make a decision. Should I tell my husband and risk shattering the life we had built together? Or should I pray that it would once again fade into obscurity, never to be seen by anyone who mattered? The thought of him seeing the video, of hearing the things I said and did, was unbearable. I didn't want him to lose his confidence or question our relationship because of a mistake I made so long ago. Panic set in immediately. My mind raced with thoughts of who might have already seen it. My husband. Our friends. What if one of my children's friends stumbled upon it? The thought of my husband's colleagues or even our neighbors seeing it made my stomach churn. I couldn't let this happen. I had to do something, and I had to do it fast. I spent the next few hours frantically trying to get the video taken down. I reported it to the site, pleading with them to remove it. But I knew the process could take days, if not weeks. I searched for contact information, desperately trying to reach someone who could help me. Every minute the video stayed up felt like a lifetime. The fear gnawed at me, a constant gnawing anxiety that made it hard to breathe. The days that followed were a blur of fear and desperation. Every time my phone buzzed with a notification, my heart would leap into my throat. I avoided social media, terrified of seeing a message or comment about the video. The fear of discovery consumed me, infiltrating every aspect of my life. I felt like I was walking on a tightrope, balancing precariously over a chasm of humiliation and ruin. As I lay in bed one night, unable to sleep, my thoughts turned to my husband. We had built a beautiful life together over the past 15 years. He was my rock, my confidant, the love of my life. We had weathered many storms together, but this was different. This was a storm I had created, and I had hidden it from him for all these years. The guilt weighed heavily on me, and I knew I couldn't keep this secret much longer. But the thought of telling him filled me with dread. How would he react? Would he be angry? Hurt? Disappointed? I feared all of these reactions and more. I feared the look of betrayal in his eyes. The possibility that he might never look at me the same way again. I had always prided myself on being honest with him. But this was a secret I had kept buried deep, and now it was threatening to tear us apart. I played out different scenarios in my mind, imagining how the conversation might go. In one scenario, he was understanding, holding me as I cried and reassuring me that we would get through this together. In another, he was furious, shouting and demanding to know why I had kept this from him. And in the worst scenario, he was devastated, his trust in me shattered, and our marriage left hanging by a thread. The emotional struggle was almost too much to bear. On one hand, I wanted to come clean, to lay everything out in the open and hope for the best. But on the other hand, I was terrified of the potential consequences. The thought of him seeing the video was unbearable. I didn't want him to see me in that way, to hear the things I said and did. I didn't want him to feel insecure or inadequate because of a mistake I made so long ago. As the days turned into a week, the pressure continued to mount. I found myself withdrawing from him, afraid that he would sense something was wrong. He noticed, of course, asking me if everything was okay. I forced a smile and assured him that I was fine, but inside, I was falling apart. The guilt and fear were eating away at me, and I knew I couldn't keep this up much longer. In the gentle embrace of dawn, the world outside seemed suspended in a serene stillness, a stark contrast to the turmoil that churned within the walls of our home. I, Laura, lay awake long before the alarm clock's call, caught between the lingering vestiges of sleep and the sobering reality that awaited with the rise of the sun. The man sleeping peacefully next to me was James, my partner of 15 years, the pillar of strength in my life, unaware that the foundation of our shared existence was on the brink of collapse. That morning unfolded like any other, cloaked in the comforting rhythms of domesticity, preparing breakfast, the laughter and squabbles of our children, the simple yet profound joy found in the minutiae of family life. These were the moments I cherished, a stark contrast to the reckless shadows of my youth. Little did I know, my past was a specter about to breach the sanctity of the present. James had taken the day off to tackle some long overdue home improvements, a rare opportunity for him to indulge in the quiet satisfaction of manual labor. I left for work with a kiss and a casual goodbye, oblivious to the impending storm that would soon engulf our lives. The day passed in a blur of mundane tasks, the normalcy of my routine a stark contrast to the chaos that awaited at home. When I returned, the air felt charged, heavy with a tension that made my heart race. James was sitting at the kitchen table, an artifact of my past life open before him. My old laptop, which I thought I had hidden away forever in the dusty confines of our attic. The screen displayed a paused video, a reckless moment from 2 decades ago that I had never intended for anyone, least of all James, to see. "Laura, we need to talk," James said, his voice unnaturally calm, belying the storm of emotions evident in his eyes. The video was from a time when I was another person, naive and impulsive, making choices without considering the far-reaching consequences. As James pressed play, the laughter and carelessness of my 18-year-old self filled the room, a haunting echo of a past I could no longer escape. "How long have you kept this from me?" James asked, his voice cracking under the weight of his emotions. The shock and disbelief in his eyes wounded me more deeply than any words could. I stumbled over my explanations, each sentence laden with remorse. "James, it was a mistake, a moment of foolishness. I'm not that person anymore. I didn't think. I was scared it would destroy us," I pleaded, my voice thick with tears. But apologies and tears could not undo the hurt. James listened, his face a mask of betrayal and anger. Each word seemed to carve a deeper chasm between us, his trust crumbling under the weight of my concealed past. Our home, once a haven of love and understanding, became a battlefield of emotions. Our conversation stretched into the night, fraught with tears and recriminations. James struggled, not just with the existence of the video but with the implications it had on his self-image and our relationship. He felt betrayed, questioning not only the truth of our past but every truth we had shared since. "I look at you now, Laura, and all I see is a lie. How do I trust anything anymore?" His words cut through the air, heavy with an anguish that I had unwittingly inflicted. The emotional toll was immense. I watched as the man I loved wrestled with his pain, a pain I had caused with a moment's indiscretion long buried. Despite my desperate attempts to bridge the gap between us, to heal the wounds of the past, the damage seemed irreparable. Weeks passed, each day a reminder of the widening rift. The laughter that once filled our home was replaced by an oppressive silence that spoke volumes. Our attempts to reclaim the ease of our relationship felt forced, a sad pantomime of a happiness that was slipping away. Finally, A cold evening marked the end of our shared journey. James, his face etched with resolve and sorrow, stood before me. "I can't do this, Laura. I can't be the man you need me to be, not with this between us. It's over," he declared, the finality of his words shattering the last vestiges of hope I harbored. As he packed his belongings, each item a testament to the life we had built together, I felt an overwhelming sense of loss. The future we had envisioned, the plans we had made, all lay in ruins at my feet. With the closing of the door, the final echo of his departure marked the beginning of my solitude. In the crushing silence, I was left to confront the magnitude of my past mistakes and the ruinous impact they had wrought. It was a reckoning, a painful yet necessary reflection on the consequences of actions long thought forgotten. The poignant tale of Laura and James serves as a rich narrative filled with vital lessons about relationships, personal integrity, and the complexities of human interaction. At its core, it implores us to consider the long-term consequences of our actions, particularly how choices made in moments of youthful impulsiveness can reverberate through our lives in unexpected and often painful ways. Laura's story illuminates the stark reality that actions have consequences, sometimes delayed, that can alter the course of our lives. The indiscretion of an 18-year-old, thought to be a fleeting moment, later emerged as a catalyst for the unraveling of a long-term partnership. This underscores the importance of foresight in our decisions. Especially in today's digital age, where moments are captured and stored indefinitely, the youth must be cognizant that today's decisions can become tomorrow's burdens or lessons. Entering into a marriage or any significant relationship without complete honesty sets a precarious foundation. Laura's choice to withhold her past from James, despite her reasons rooted in fear of losing him, eventually led to a breach of trust that proved insurmountable. This story powerfully advocates for transparency and honesty from the outset of a relationship. Sharing one's past, especially aspects that might later impact the relationship, is crucial. It not only fosters trust but also builds a deeper understanding and empathy between partners. Communication is the lifeline of any relationship, and Laura and James's story highlights the necessity of effective, open, and honest dialogue. Their inability to communicate effectively in the aftermath of the revelation shows how essential it is to develop these skills. Partners must strive to listen genuinely, express feelings without accusation, and seek mutual understanding rather than victory in disputes. Communication should be a bridge, not a barrier, in understanding each other's perspectives and experiences. Laura's emotional turmoil was not solely due to the discovery of the video but also stemmed from her years of hiding a significant part of her past. This narrative teaches the importance of living authentically. Hiding true selves or significant pieces of our history from those we love can lead to feelings of isolation and fear. Authenticity in how we live and communicate fosters genuine relationships where both partners love and accept each other wholly, imperfections included. The story also highlights the importance of not allowing past mistakes to dictate our future. Laura's journey towards self-forgiveness and personal growth in the wake of her marriage's dissolution teaches that while we must take responsibility for our past actions, we should also strive to move beyond them. This involves a conscious decision to learn from our mistakes, make amends where possible, and then put them behind us, not allowing them to perpetually cast a shadow over our lives. Lastly, relationships often act as mirrors, reflecting our deepest fears, insecurities, and also our strengths. James's reaction to the video is not just about betrayal, but also about how external situations can trigger internal insecurities and doubts. This story reminds us that part of being in a relationship is helping each other through these vulnerabilities, offering support, and growing together through challenges. In essence, Laura and James's story, while a tale of loss and regret, is also a beacon guiding toward a more conscious, honest, and communicative way of living and loving. It teaches that while the truth can sometimes be painful, it is invariably the path to deeper connection, and ultimately, personal liberation. My pregnant daughter is about to marry an incarcerated man. How do I deal with this situation while being estranged by my daughter? My name is Evelyn, and I am 47 years old. I have always considered myself a devoted mother, one who would do anything to ensure the happiness and well-being of her children. My life has been a tapestry of joys and challenges, woven with the threads of my family's journey. I have 2 children, my eldest Natalie, who is 22, and my son Daniel, who is 18. This story, however, revolves around Natalie, my brilliant, beautiful, and headstrong daughter, who has always been the apple of my eye. Natalie has always been a remarkable young woman. From a very young age, she exhibited an intelligence and determination that set her apart from her peers. She excelled academically, earning top grades in school and winning numerous awards. Her passion for learning and helping others led her to pursue a career in dentistry. I remember the pride swelling in my chest when she graduated from high school with honors. Her future seemed so bright and full of promise. After high school, Natalie went on to college, where she continued to shine. She graduated with an associate's degree in dental hygiene and was subsequently accepted into a prestigious dental school. Her acceptance was a testament to her hard work and dedication. As a mother, I couldn't have been prouder. Natalie had everything going for her: a bright future, a loving family, and a supportive partner. Natalie's personal life also seemed to be on a positive trajectory. She had been in a steady and healthy relationship with her high school sweetheart Mark. Mark was a kind and responsible young man who adored Natalie. They met during their senior year of high school and quickly became inseparable. Their relationship blossomed over the years, and they supported each other through the ups and downs of young adulthood. I saw in Mark the qualities of a devoted partner and a good father. About a year ago, Natalie and Mark welcomed their first child into the world, a beautiful baby boy named Oliver. Watching Natalie become a mother was one of the most profound experiences of my life. She embraced motherhood with grace and dedication, balancing her studies and her new responsibilities with remarkable poise. Mark was equally committed, proving himself to be a loving and attentive father. Their little family seemed perfect, and they even got engaged 6 months ago, planning to marry after Natalie finished her dental studies. However, life has a way of throwing unexpected challenges our way. Around the same time Natalie and Mark got engaged, she began a peculiar new hobby: writing letters to prisoners. Initially, I was uncomfortable with the idea. The notion of my daughter communicating with inmates was unsettling, to say the least. But Natalie assured me it was merely a way to offer companionship to those who were lonely and forgotten by society. She believed everyone deserved a second chance and wanted to make a difference, even if it was just through words on paper. Natalie explained the pen pal program to me over dinner one evening. She was animated and enthusiastic, her eyes sparkling with the excitement of doing something meaningful. "Mom, these people are human too. They've made mistakes, but they deserve a second chance, a little bit of hope," she said. I nodded, admiring her compassion but feeling a knot tighten in my stomach. Writing to prisoners was not something I had ever considered, and it seemed fraught with potential dangers. Initially, I tried to dissuade her. "Natalie, are you sure this is safe? You don't know these people, and prisons are filled with individuals who have committed serious crimes," I cautioned. But she was resolute. "I'll be careful, Mom. I'll use a P.O. box, and I won't give out any personal information. It's just letters. What harm could it do?" Seeing her determination, I reluctantly agreed, on the condition that she use a P.O. box for all correspondence. I rented one for her myself, hoping this small precaution would provide a buffer between her and any potential danger. As the weeks turned into months, I watched her immerse herself in this new activity. She would often sit at the kitchen table, surrounded by stationery, writing long, heartfelt letters. Her dedication was touching, and despite my reservations, I couldn't help but feel proud of her for wanting to make a difference. One name began to come up more frequently in our conversations: Jacob. At first it was just in passing. "Jacob wrote me the most beautiful letter today. He's so articulate and thoughtful," she would say. Gradually he became a central figure in her letters. She would read me excerpts from his responses, and I could see why she was drawn to him. He wrote with a sensitivity and depth that were unexpected from someone in his circumstances. He spoke of regret, redemption, and hope for a better future. Still, I couldn't shake my unease. As time went on, I noticed a shift in Natalie. She started talking about Jacob not just as a pen pal but as someone who had become important to her. "Mom, Jacob's different. He's not like the others. He's intelligent, kind, and he understands me in a way no one else does," she said one evening, her voice filled with conviction. I could see the spark in her eyes, the same one I had seen when she talked about Mark in the early days of their relationship. It was then that I began to worry that this was more than just a pen pal friendship. My worst fears were confirmed one Sunday afternoon. Natalie had been unusually quiet all morning, and I could tell something was on her mind. We were sitting on the porch, enjoying the warm sunshine, when she turned to me and said, "Mom, there's something I need to tell you." Her tone was serious, and I felt a pang of anxiety. "I'm in love with Jacob," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "We've been writing to each other for almost 8 months, and I've fallen for him. He's everything I've ever wanted in a partner. He makes me feel special and understood." The words hit me like a ton of bricks. I stared at her, unable to speak, my mind racing with 1,000 thoughts. How could this be happening? My daughter, who had so much going for her, was in love with a man behind bars. "Natalie, this is crazy. You don't even know him. He's in prison for a reason," I finally managed to say, my voice shaking with a mixture of fear and anger. But she was resolute. "I do know him, Mom. We've shared so much with each other through our letters. He's made mistakes, yes, but he's changed. He's not the same person he was when he went in." We argued for hours that day, each of us standing our ground. I tried to make her see reason, to understand the dangers and the potential heartbreak she was inviting into her life. But she was adamant. "You don't understand, Mom. You've never felt what I feel for him. He's my soulmate," she said, tears streaming down her face. In the following weeks, I tried to come to terms with the situation. I wanted to believe that Natalie was just going through a phase, that she would eventually see the futility and danger of her actions. But instead, she became more entrenched in her relationship with Jacob. She started visiting him regularly, taking Oliver with her. The thought of my grandson being exposed to such an environment made me sick with worry. One evening, she showed me photos from her visits. There they were, smiling and embracing, Jacob holding Oliver as if he were his own. It was a surreal and heartbreaking sight. "Mom, he loves Oliver. He wants to be a father to him," she said, her voice filled with a hope that I found both touching and terrifying. Desperate to understand, I began to research Jacob's past. What I found only deepened my fear and anger. Jacob had a long criminal record, including charges of armed robbery and assault. He was serving a lengthy sentence for his crimes, and there was no guarantee he would be released anytime soon. The thought of my daughter and grandson being involved with someone so dangerous was unbearable. I confronted Natalie with what I had learned, hoping it would make her see reason. "Natalie, this man is dangerous. He has a history of violence. You can't risk your life and Oliver's life for someone like him," I pleaded. But she remained steadfast. "Mom, people can change. He's paid for his mistakes, and he's a different person now. Why can't you see that?" she responded, her eyes filled with a mixture of defiance and hurt. Our relationship became increasingly strained. We argued constantly, and every conversation seemed to end in tears and frustration. Natalie accused me of not trusting her judgment, of not understanding her love for Jacob. I, on the other hand, couldn't understand how she could be so blind to the risks and the potential for heartbreak. The tension between us grew, and I felt like I was losing her. The breaking point came when Natalie told me Jacob had proposed to her during one of her visits, and she had accepted. I was beyond shocked. "You can't be serious, Natalie. You're going to marry a man who is in prison? What kind of life will that be for you and Oliver?" I demanded, my voice rising with a mixture of anger and desperation. But she was determined. "I love him, Mom. He's the one I want to be with, and we're going to make it work," she said, her face set with a resolve that both scared and saddened me. Our argument that day was the worst we had ever had. We both said things we regretted, and the rift between us widened. Natalie accused me of being controlling and unsupportive, and I, in turn, told her she was being naive and reckless. In the end, she stormed out of the house, vowing that she wouldn't let me stand in the way of her happiness. I was left standing there, feeling a profound sense of loss and helplessness. Since that day, Natalie has distanced herself from me. She moved out, taking Oliver with her, and cut off almost all communication. The pain of not seeing my daughter and grandson is a constant ache in my heart. I feel like I've lost her to a man I believe will bring nothing but pain and disappointment into her life. I lie awake at night, tormented by thoughts of what could happen to her and Oliver, and feeling utterly powerless to protect them. In the months that followed, I tried to find ways to bridge the gap between us. I sent letters, left messages, and even tried to reach out through mutual friends. But Natalie remained distant, unwilling to let me back into her life unless I accepted her relationship with Jacob. It was a price I couldn't pay, and the stalemate continued. As Natalie's relationship with Jacob deepened, my concerns grew exponentially. The thought of my daughter and grandson being involved with a man with such a dangerous past kept me up at night. My mind was a whirlwind of worst-case scenarios, each one more terrifying than the last. I could feel the tight-knit fabric of our family beginning to unravel, and I felt helpless to stop it. Our once peaceful household became a battleground of arguments and strained silences. The tension was palpable, hanging in the air like a dark cloud. Every conversation with Natalie seemed to escalate into a heated dispute, leaving us both emotionally drained. I tried to be patient, to choose my words carefully, but my fear for her and Oliver's safety often got the better of me. "Natalie, you have to think about Oliver. What kind of life will he have with Jacob in the picture?" I pleaded one evening, my voice trembling with desperation. We were in the living room, and I could see the frustration building in her eyes. "Mom, I am thinking about Oliver. Jacob loves him, and he wants to be a good father. He's changed." "People can change," she responded, her tone edged with irritation. "How can you be so sure? You've known him for less than a year, and most of that time he's been behind bars." "You don't know what he's really like," I countered, trying to keep my voice steady. "Why can't you just trust me, Mom? I'm not a child. I know what I'm doing," she shot back, her eyes flashing with defiance. The arguments would often end with Natalie storming out of the room, leaving me alone with my fears and doubts. I felt like I was losing her to a man I barely knew, and it broke my heart. The Natalie I knew was slipping away, replaced by someone I barely recognized. Someone who was willing to risk everything for a love I couldn't understand. The situation was further complicated by the presence of Natalie's ex-fiancé, Mark. Mark had been a part of our family for years, and his sudden departure from Natalie's life left a gaping hole. He was devastated by the breakup, and his pain mirrored my own. We often found ourselves confiding in each other, trying to make sense of the chaos that had upended our lives. Mark came over one evening, his face drawn and weary. We sat in the kitchen, sipping coffee and sharing our worries. "I just don't understand it, Evelyn. We were happy. I thought we had a future together," he said, his voice cracking with emotion. "I know, Mark. I thought the same. This relationship with Jacob, it's tearing us all apart," I replied, my eyes welling up with tears. Mark nodded, his expression one of deep sorrow. "I miss Oliver so much. I miss Natalie. It feels like I've lost my family," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. I reached out and squeezed his hand, trying to offer some comfort. "We'll get through this, Mark. We have to. For Oliver's sake," I said, though I wasn't sure if I believed it myself. The impact of Natalie's new relationship on our family was profound. Oliver, only a little over a year old, was caught in the middle of a situation he couldn't possibly understand. I worried about the stability and safety of his environment. Natalie's visits to the prison, taking Oliver with her, seemed reckless and irresponsible to me. I feared for his well-being and the kind of influence Jacob might have on him. My relationship with Natalie became increasingly strained. The more I tried to intervene, the more she pushed me away. She accused me of not respecting her decisions, of trying to control her life. It was a painful accusation, and it cut deeply. I had always prided myself on being a supportive and understanding mother, but this situation tested my limits. The breaking point came one afternoon when Natalie announced she was moving out. She couldn't stand the constant arguments and the atmosphere of disapproval. "I need space, Mom. I can't live like this anymore. I need to do what's right for me and Oliver," she said, her voice steady but filled with an underlying sadness. "Natalie, please. Don't do this. We can work it out. You don't have to leave," I begged, my heart breaking at the thought of her and Oliver moving out. "I'm sorry, Mom, but I have to. I need to build a life with Jacob and I can't do that here," she replied, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. I watched helplessly as she packed her things and left, taking Oliver with her. The house felt emptier than ever, the silence a constant reminder of the fractured state of our family. I felt like I had failed her, failed to protect her and guide her through this tumultuous time. The weeks that followed were a blur of sorrow and worry. Natalie kept her distance, and my attempts to reach out were met with silence. Mark too was struggling to cope with the loss. He continued to visit, and we found solace in each other's company, trying to navigate the emotional minefield we were both trapped in. The family dynamics had shifted dramatically. Daniel, my younger son, was affected as well. He was close to Natalie and Oliver, and their absence weighed heavily on him. He struggled to understand why his sister had made such a drastic decision, and I found myself trying to reassure him even as I grappled with my own doubts. One evening, as we sat down for dinner, Daniel broke the silence that had settled over the table. "Mom, do you think Natalie will ever come back?" he asked, his voice tinged with sadness. "I hope so, Daniel. I really do. We just have to give her time and support her as best we can," I replied, though I wasn't sure if I believed it myself. The strain of the situation took a toll on my health. I found it hard to sleep, my mind constantly racing with worries about Natalie and Oliver. I lost weight, and my energy levels plummeted. Friends and family noticed the change and expressed their concern, but I felt powerless to change the course of events. In the midst of this turmoil, I sought solace in my faith and in the support of close friends. I spent hours praying, hoping for some divine intervention that would bring my daughter back to me. I also leaned on my best friend, Susan, who had been a pillar of strength throughout this ordeal. Susan would visit regularly, offering a listening ear and words of comfort. "Evelyn, you've done everything you can. Natalie knows you love her. She'll come around eventually," she would say, her voice filled with reassuring confidence. "I hope you're right, Susan. I just feel so helpless. I want to protect her, but I don't know how," I would reply, my heart heavy with worry. Susan's words of comfort were a small beacon of hope in the midst of my despair. But as the days stretched into weeks, and then months, I found myself sinking deeper into a sense of hopelessness. Natalie remained resolute in her decision to marry Jacob, despite my best efforts to make her see reason. One afternoon, as I sat alone in my living room, the weight of my worry pressing down on me like a leaden blanket, the phone rang. It was Mark, Natalie's ex-fiancé. His voice was strained, filled with a mixture of anger and despair. Evelyn, have you seen the news? He asked, his words tumbling out in a rush. I felt a shiver of apprehension run down my spine. No, what's happened? I asked, my heart pounding in my chest. It's Jacob. He's been arrested again, Mark replied, his voice thick with emotion. The news hit me like a punch to the gut. I could hardly believe it. How could things possibly get any worse? But as Mark filled me in on the details, my worst fears were confirmed. Jacob had been charged with a series of violent crimes, including assault and robbery. It was a devastating blow, one that sent shockwaves through our already fractured family. As the reality of the situation sank in, I felt a surge of anger and frustration. How could Natalie have been so blind to Jacob's true nature? How could she have put herself and Oliver in such danger? The sense of betrayal was overwhelming, and I struggled to contain my emotions. But amid the turmoil, there was a glimmer of hope. Mark and I had discussed the possibility of taking legal action to protect Natalie and Oliver from Jacob's influence, and now it seemed more urgent than ever. With Jacob behind bars, we had a window of opportunity to intervene, to ensure that Natalie and Oliver were kept safe from harm. I called Mark immediately, and we arranged to meet as soon as possible to discuss our next steps. Despite the pain and heartache of the past months, there was a sense of determination in my heart. I would do whatever it took to protect my daughter and grandson from further harm, even if it meant facing Jacob in court. As Mark arrived at my home, his face drawn and weary, I could see the weight of the world on his shoulders. We sat down together at the kitchen table, our minds racing with possibilities and uncertainties. But amidst the chaos, there was a sense of solidarity, a shared commitment to do whatever was necessary to safeguard our family's future. I can't believe it's come to this, Mark said, his voice breaking with emotion. I never imagined things would end up like this. I know, Mark. But we have to stay strong for Natalie and Oliver. They need us now more than ever, I replied, my voice steady with resolve. We spent hours discussing our options, weighing the risks and benefits of each course of action. In the end, we agreed that taking Jacob to court was the best course of action. It was a daunting prospect, filled with uncertainty and potential backlash, but we knew it was the only way to ensure Natalie's safety and well-being. The days that followed were a whirlwind of activity as we prepared for the legal battle ahead. We consulted with lawyers, gathered evidence, and braced ourselves for the challenges that lay ahead. It was a daunting task, but knowing that we were fighting for Natalie and Oliver gave us the strength to persevere. As the news of our intentions to take Jacob to court reached Natalie, the fallout was swift and devastating. I received a barrage of angry messages and missed calls from her, each one more hostile than the last. My heart sank as I read her words, filled with venom and betrayal. How had it come to this? How had our efforts to protect her and Oliver been interpreted as an act of betrayal? The weight of Natalie's accusations bore down on me like a crushing weight, leaving me feeling more lost and helpless than ever before. I had hoped that our actions would be seen as a desperate attempt to keep her safe from harm, but instead, they had only served to further alienate us from her. In a moment of desperation, I tried to call her, to explain our reasoning and reassure her of our love and concern. But she rejected my calls, refusing to engage with me in any way. The rejection felt like a knife to the heart, leaving me feeling more alone and isolated than ever before. As the days passed, the silence from Natalie grew deafening. I longed to reach out to her, to mend the rift that had torn our family apart, but I didn't know where to begin. How could I bridge the gap between us when she refused to even acknowledge my existence? Then, just when I thought things couldn't get any worse, I received a text message from Natalie. My heart skipped a beat as I read her words, filled with anger and resentment. She cursed me in language that cut to the bone, accusing me of betraying her trust and tearing her family apart. It was a heartbreaking moment, one that left me reeling with shock and disbelief. I tried to respond, to plead with her to listen to reason, but she blocked my number before I could send a single word. The rejection felt like a physical blow, leaving me gasping for breath as tears streamed down my cheeks. How had it come to this? How had our once loving relationship been reduced to this toxic exchange of insults and accusations? As a mother, watching my daughter make choices that I strongly disagree with is one of the most painful experiences I have ever endured. Natalie's decision to marry Jacob, an incarcerated man with a troubled past, feels like a nightmare that I can't wake up from. The thought of her committing herself to someone with such a questionable background fills me with a sense of dread and helplessness. I've tried everything to express my concerns to Natalie, to make her see the potential dangers of her choices. But she's so deeply entrenched in her relationship with Jacob that it's like talking to a brick wall. Every time I bring up my fears, she becomes defensive, lashing out at me for not supporting her decisions. It's a vicious cycle of arguments and hurt feelings that leaves both of us feeling more isolated and frustrated than ever. Now, Natalie refuses to speak to me or allow me to see my grandbaby. The thought of being cut off from them fills me with a pain that is almost unbearable. I love my daughter more than anything in this world, and the idea of losing her over this rift breaks my heart into a million pieces. I've always prided myself on being a supportive and understanding mother, but this situation has tested my limits in ways I never imagined. As much as I want to respect Natalie's autonomy and independence as an adult, I can't shake the feeling that she's making a grave mistake. One that could have devastating consequences for her and my precious grandson. I'm scared for her, terrified of what could happen if she goes through with this marriage. Jacob's past is filled with violence and criminal activity, and I can't help but fear for Natalie's safety. The thought of her being trapped in a relationship with someone who could potentially harm her fills me with a sense of dread that I can't shake. I don't know what else I can do to make Natalie see reason. I've tried talking to her, pleading with her, even begging her to reconsider her decision. But she's so blinded by love that she refuses to listen to reason. It's like she's in a whole other world, one where the dangers and risks are just a distant echo. I feel so hopeless, so powerless to change the course of events. All I want is for Natalie to be safe and happy, but it feels like an impossible task. I don't know where to turn or who to ask for help. I'm lost in a sea of uncertainty, desperately searching for a lifeline to pull me out of this nightmare. Please, if anyone out there has any advice or guidance, I'm begging you to share it with me. I can't bear the thought of losing my daughter and grandchild to a situation that seems so reckless and dangerous. I need to find a way to reach Natalie, to make her see the truth before it's too late. But I can't do it alone. I need your help. I divorced my wife because of the changes she made after I confided in her about being raped as a child. I am Alex, a 27-year-old software engineer, and this is the story of my wife, Emily, and me. Our lives together have woven a tapestry of shared moments and unspoken emotions, with threads of joy, and strands of tension that sometimes seem to fray. In the quiet suburban neighborhood where we live, our home stands as a sanctuary of comfort and familiarity. It's a cozy 2-story house with a well-tended garden out front, where Emily spends hours nurturing her beloved roses. She has an affinity for colors. Soft blues and greens dominate our living room, where we often unwind after our respective workdays. Physically, I'm of average height with a lean build, often sporting a 5 o'clock shadow that Emily teasingly calls my thinker's beard. My days revolve around coding, solving intricate puzzles of algorithms that intrigue me endlessly. Weekends, though, are for outdoor escapades, hiking trails or exploring nearby towns, activities Emily enjoys just as much as I do. Emily, on the other hand, exudes a warmth that draws people in effortlessly. With her flowing auburn hair and bright hazel eyes, she's the epitome of approachability. Her days are spent as a social worker, dedicating herself to helping children navigate turbulent lives, a calling that reflects her compassionate nature. We met during college orientation, where our paths crossed in a crowded cafeteria. She was holding a stack of books precariously, and I offered my assistance, clumsily charming her with my awkwardness. Our journey together began with tentative steps through the maze of college life, where we discovered a shared love for indie music and late-night philosophical debates over cups of cheap dorm coffee. As our friendship blossomed into something deeper, our adventures took us beyond campus, road trips to music festivals, impromptu picnics in secluded parks, and the thrill of discovering new passions together. The decision to move in together came naturally after we graduated. We found a cozy apartment on the outskirts of the city, a place where the morning sunlight filtered through sheer curtains, casting a warm glow on mismatched furniture we inherited from family and friends. It was our little haven, filled with the scent of freshly brewed coffee and the faint hum of Emily's favorite indie tunes playing softly in the background. Adjusting to living under the same roof brought its challenges and joys. We discovered each other's quirks, Emily's penchant for leaving sticky notes on the fridge with reminders and my habit of leaving shoes by the door. Despite occasional disagreements over whose turn it was to do the dishes or walk the neighbor's dog, we learned the art of compromise and laughter that echoed through our shared spaces. Career paths diverged as we delved deeper into our chosen fields. Emily's passion for social work led her to a local children's center, where her empathy and dedication shone brightly. Long hours and emotionally taxing days were met with a steadfast resolve to make a difference in the lives of vulnerable children. I, on the other hand, immersed myself in the world of technology, navigating the intricate landscapes of coding and software development. Late nights at the office were balanced by moments of triumph when lines of code finally yielded to elegant solutions. Amidst the chaos of career uncertainties, we leaned on each other for support. Emily's comforting words and unwavering belief in my abilities became my anchor during moments of self-doubt. In turn, I became her sounding board, listening to her aspirations and dreams, offering reassurance when setbacks loomed large. 2 years into our journey together, We stood hand in hand beneath a canopy of autumn leaves, surrounded by family and friends who had witnessed our love flourish. Emily's radiant smile illuminated the day as she walked down the aisle, her eyes locked on mine with unwavering certainty. Vows exchanged in whispers carried promises of a future filled with shared dreams and unwavering devotion. The reception that followed was a testament to our shared joy, a blend of heartfelt toasts, laughter echoing off the walls, and dance moves that defied our usual grace. Amidst the celebration, I stole glances at Emily, marveling at the depth of emotion etched across her face. It was a day that encapsulated the culmination of our journey so far, a day we vowed to cherish as we embarked on the next chapter of our lives together. As the evening drew to a close, we stole away to a quiet corner of the venue, our fingers intertwined as we marveled at the surrealness of the day. Emily's eyes sparkled with unshed tears of happiness, her hand resting gently against my cheek as she whispered promises of forever. In that moment, surrounded by the love and warmth of our loved ones, I knew with unwavering certainty that our love was a force that could weather any storm. Our daily routine now revolves around a delicate balance of work and domestic life. Mornings begin with the aroma of freshly brewed coffee, a ritual I cherish, preparing us for the day ahead. Emily rushes off to her job at a local children's center, leaving a lingering kiss on my cheek. Despite our busy schedules, evenings are sacrosanct, a time for shared dinners and conversations about everything and nothing. Yet beneath this facade of domestic bliss, subtle tensions simmer. Our journey together has not been without its trials. Despite our dreams of starting a family, the path to parenthood has been fraught with heartache. Months turned into years of disappointment as we navigated fertility treatments and consultations with specialists. Each negative pregnancy test felt like a heavy blow, leaving us both grappling with a sense of loss and inadequacy. For Emily, the weight of expectation, both societal and personal, bears down heavily. Her role as a caregiver extends beyond her profession, nurturing a longing within her that remains unfulfilled. I see it in the way she withdraws at times, retreating into herself to cope with the monthly cycles of hope and despair. Her once radiant smile now carries a subtle veil of sorrow, a reflection of the emotional toll our struggles have taken on her spirit. As for me, the inability to provide the family we yearned for gnaws at my core. I bury myself deeper in my work, seeking solace in the intricate algorithms that once fascinated me. The closeness we once shared feels strained under the weight of unspoken grief and the fear of what the future holds. Nights that were once filled with whispered dreams and shared warmth now echo with a silence that speaks volumes. Physical intimacy, once a cornerstone of our bond, has become a delicate dance of longing and apprehension. The touch that once ignited sparks of passion now carries an unspoken hesitation. We move through the motions with a practiced familiarity, yet the connection that once bound us feels tenuous, slipping further from our grasp. I find myself longing for the days when our bodies spoke a language of their own, a language that conveyed love, desire, and a shared understanding without the need for words. Now, our embraces are punctuated by unspoken questions and fleeting moments of hesitation. Emily's touch when it comes is gentle but guarded, as if afraid to reopen wounds that have yet to heal. I yearn to bridge the distance between us, to reclaim the intimacy that once defined us. Yet each attempt feels like tiptoeing through a minefield of unspoken fears and unmet expectations. I ache to comfort Emily, to reassure her of my unwavering love and devotion, but words fail me in the face of our shared grief. In our quest to navigate this tumultuous terrain, we have sought solace in different coping mechanisms. Emily throws herself into her work with renewed vigor, channeling her nurturing instincts into supporting vulnerable children who cross her path. Her dedication is both admirable and heartbreaking, a testament to her resilience in the face of adversity. For my part, I have turned inward, seeking solace in solitary pursuits and occasional outings with friends who offer a temporary distraction from the weight of our reality. Yet, amidst the distractions, the ache remains, a constant reminder of the void that looms large between us. In the midst of our struggles, there came a moment that breathed life into our relationship, a fragile oasis amidst the desert of uncertainty and grief. It was a cool evening in early spring, the kind that carries a hint of promise in the air. I had orchestrated a plan, a meticulously planned evening to remind Emily and myself of the love that bound us together. I had asked to leave work early that day, a request tinged with nervous anticipation. While Emily was busy at the children's center, I set the stage at home. The soft glow of candlelight danced across the dining room, casting flickering shadows that seemed to whisper of secrets yet untold. The table, adorned with Emily's favorite flowers, a bouquet of lilies, stood as a testament to my love and longing. In the kitchen, pots and pans clattered as I prepared a meal that spoke of comfort and familiarity. Emily's favorite pasta dish accompanied by a side of garlic bread. The savory aroma that filled the air mingled with the floral notes of the candles, creating an ambiance that promised an evening of shared warmth and intimacy. As the sun dipped below the horizon, heralding Emily's return, I felt a surge of nervous energy knotting my stomach. Would she sense the effort I had poured into this evening, the silent plea for us to reconnect amidst the storm that threatened to tear us apart? Emily's smile upon entering the house was like a ray of sunshine breaking through the clouds. She noticed the candles immediately, her eyes widening in surprise and a soft gasp escaping her lips. I took her coat and guided her to the table, pulling out a chair for her with a flourish that elicited a chuckle from her. A sound that warmed my heart more than any candlelit ambiance could. We dined slowly, savoring each bite as if the flavors held the secrets of our shared history. Conversation flowed effortlessly, punctuated by laughter that echoed through the walls of our home. The wine, a deep red that Emily favored, served as a catalyst, loosening the knots of tension that had bound us in silence for too long. After dinner, I insisted on clearing the table and washing the dishes, a gesture that earned me a grateful smile and a gentle touch on my shoulder from Emily. As I dried my hands, I suggested we retire to the living room for the next phase of my carefully laid plan. In the cozy embrace of our living room, we settled onto the couch, the soft glow of the TV casting a gentle light upon us. I had chosen a movie, a classic romance, that I knew held sentimental value for Emily. The opening credits rolled, and I stole glances at her throughout, drinking in the sight of her relaxed form beside me. As the story unfolded on screen, our hands found each other, fingers intertwining in a silent promise of solidarity. The characters' trials and triumphs mirrored our own journey, moments of heartache and hope intertwined with the unyielding belief in the power of love to transcend all obstacles. With each passing scene, I felt a renewed sense of purpose, a determination to nurture the flickering flame of our bond. Emily's head rested against my shoulder, her breathing steady and even. I dared to hope that this evening, this fragile moment suspended in time, would serve as a catalyst for healing and renewal. The evening of our romantic date at home lingered in the air like a sweet echo of forgotten melodies. Emily and I found ourselves drawn closer, the intimacy we had shared reigniting a flicker of hope amidst the shadows of our struggles. Yet, as life often does, it offered a twist. A subtle shift that unraveled the fragile equilibrium we had so delicately crafted. A few nights after our memorable evening, Emily suggested we start watching a new series recommended by our friends. Baby Reindeer on Netflix. I had heard vague descriptions of its content, sexual abuse, stalking. But I reassured myself that my past was firmly behind me. I believed I could face any depiction of such themes with stoic resolve, confident in my ability to compartmentalize. With a sense of nonchalance that belied the storm brewing within, I agreed to watch the first episode. The opening scenes unfolded innocuously enough, introducing the protagonist and the premise of the show. Emily curled up beside me on the couch, her hand resting lightly on mine. A silent reassurance that anchored me amidst the growing unease. As the narrative delved deeper into the protagonist's experiences of manipulation and violation, a chill settled over me. A familiar echo of buried memories stirring beneath the surface. Scenes that mirrored fragments of my own past flashed across the screen, each frame a haunting reflection of the darkness I had long sought to bury. I felt Emily's gaze shift towards me, concern etched into the furrow of her brow. She sensed my discomfort, the subtle tension that coiled like a serpent within my chest. I forced a smile, dismissing her unspoken question with a wave of my hand. A feeble attempt to mask the turmoil that threatened to engulf me. In the silent interludes between scenes, flashes of memory assaulted my senses, fragments of a childhood innocence shattered by betrayal and violation. The babysitter's face, once blurred by the passage of time, now loomed vivid and menacing within the recesses of my mind. Her whispered promises of secrecy echoed in the hollow chambers of memory, a stark reminder of the scars that lingered beneath the surface. Emily, ever perceptive, sensed the shift in the air. A palpable change that left us both teetering on the edge of unspoken revelation. She paused the show, her touch gentle as she turned to face me. A question hanging unspoken in the silence that stretched between us. I swallowed the lump in my throat, a bitter taste of vulnerability seeping into my words as I confessed. It's about the show, I murmured, my voice barely a whisper amidst the echoes of the past. Emily's eyes widened in understanding, a flicker of anguish crossing her features as she realized the depth of my turmoil. When I was 9, my parents hired a babysitter for my younger brother and me while they were at work. She was a college student, a young woman full of laughter and seemingly boundless energy. At first, her presence felt like a welcome addition to our routine, a source of amusement and care during the long afternoons. Initially, our time together was filled with innocent games and playful banter. She would help us with our homework and indulge our requests for stories of her adventures at college. Her smile was infectious, lighting up the room whenever she entered. At first, she engaged us in games and activities, painting a picture of care and responsibility that lulled my young mind into a sense of security. But behind closed doors, when my brother was occupied elsewhere, her demeanor changed. Innocuous moments of play morphed into unsettling encounters, a breach of trust that left me confused and fearful. The incidents were fleeting, fragmented memories that lingered like shadows in the corners of my mind. She silenced my protests with whispered assurances of secrecy, instilling a sense of shame that festered in silence. I was too young to articulate the discomfort that gnawed at me. A silent witness to acts that stained the purity of my childhood. Most of the time, I felt paralyzed. Unable to comprehend the gravity of what was happening, let alone muster the courage to stop it. She wielded her authority with a subtle but devastating effectiveness, manipulating my childlike trust with calculated precision. Each instance of abuse was followed by a peculiar ritual, a twisted form of affirmation disguised as kindness. She would buy me sweets or new video games for my Nintendo DS, a reward she called it. In my young mind, these gifts became a perverse currency, a means to placate her and earn fleeting moments of reprieve from her unwanted advances. In a strange and unsettling way, I found myself growing attached to her. Desperate for her approval and willing to endure her violations if it meant receiving her rewards. I knew even then, that what she was doing was wrong. The unease in the pit of my stomach never fully dissipated. A constant reminder of the boundaries she had crossed and the innocence she had shattered. Yet in the grip of fear and confusion, I remained silent. An unwitting accomplice to my own exploitation. Her threats loomed like dark shadows, casting a pall over my already fragile world. She warned me in hushed tones that if I ever spoke of what transpired between us, she would take my life. The weight of her words pressed down upon me, a suffocating silence that sealed my lips and shackled my voice in the chains of fear. I never dared to confide in my parents or anyone else. The shame and guilt I carried were as heavy as the threat that hung over me, a burden too great for my young shoulders to bear. The facade of normalcy I wore during those days masked the turmoil within, a mask I wore not out of deceit, but out of a desperate need to shield myself from the repercussions of revealing the truth. As I graduated from college and moved away, the immediate physical threat from my brother's babysitter ceased, but the emotional scars continued to haunt me. By this time, around the age when I began to grasp the concept of consent, I found myself grappling with the need to confront my past and seek understanding. With a heavy heart and a sense of urgency, I attempted to open up to my parents, staunch Catholics whose strict adherence to their faith colored their perception of morality and sexuality. Hoping for solace and guidance, I cautiously broached the subject, only to be met with disbelief and horror. Initially, they attributed my revelations to the corrupting influence of movies and media, accusing me of allowing my imagination to run wild with salacious fantasies. Their dismissiveness quickly gave way to anger and condemnation. My father, unable to reconcile my words with his worldview, responded with harsh words and, on occasion, physical punishment. A misguided attempt to suppress what he viewed as blasphemous accusations. My mother, torn between her maternal instincts and the teachings of her faith, punished me with a cold, silent disapproval, her disappointment casting a heavy shadow over our strained relationship. Seeking solace outside the confines of my troubled home, I turned to my friends, a desperate plea for empathy and support that fell upon deaf ears. My male friends, unequipped to comprehend the gravity of my disclosure, responded with callous remarks. They viewed my experiences through the lens of adolescent curiosity, their crude inquiries reducing my trauma to a crude joke or a badge of envy. My female friends too failed to grasp the magnitude of my revelations. They dismissed my words as fabrications, a desperate ploy for attention or sympathy. Their laughter, a painful echo of disbelief, reinforced my resolve to bury the past once more, a vow forged in the crucible of rejection and misunderstanding. Faced with rejection from both family and friends, I retreated into a self-imposed silence. A fortress of solitude built upon the shards of shattered trust and unanswered pleas for validation. I learned to bury the memories deep within, weaving a facade of normalcy to conceal the turmoil that churned within me. The wounds inflicted upon my soul, though invisible to the casual observer, bled quietly, a silent testament to the enduring scars of betrayal and abandonment. I vowed never to speak of my past again, a promise forged in the crucible of rejection and the relentless pursuit of closure. After revealing the depths of my turmoil to Emily, her reaction was a mixture of understanding and anguish, her eyes widening as she comprehended the weight of my unspoken pain. I stood there, guilt clawing at my insides, realizing the burden I had unknowingly placed upon her shoulders. Despite my fears, Emily enveloped me in a reassuring embrace, her touch offering solace amidst the storm raging within me. Her words, gentle and soothing, washed over me like a healing balm. "I'm here, Alex," she murmured softly against my hair, her voice a beacon of comfort in the darkness. You don't have to face this alone. But as I paced the length of our bedroom, seeking solace in the solitude, doubts clawed at my conscience. Was it fair to disrupt our tranquil life together with the tumult of my unresolved trauma? Could Emily truly understand the depths of my anguish, or would my pain only serve to burden her further? The guilt of unloading my past onto her shoulders consumed me. Emily had always been my rock, my pillar of strength in times of uncertainty. I cherished the way she laughed freely, the warmth of her touch, and the unwavering support she offered me in every aspect of our life together. Now, I feared that my disclosure had tainted our relationship, casting a shadow over the love and happiness we had built. In the quiet of the night, as moonlight filtered through the curtains and cast soft shadows across our bedroom floor, I wrestled with conflicting emotions. The respite of solitude offered temporary relief, yet the echoes of Emily's embrace lingered, a testament to her unwavering love and understanding. As minutes stretched into hours, I found myself replaying moments from my childhood, the innocence shattered by Mrs. Thompson's betrayal, the fear that had silenced me for years, and the aftermath of attempting to bury the trauma deep within. Each memory was a jagged piece of a puzzle I had spent years trying to forget, now brought vividly to life by the triggering scenes of the show. The realization hit me with a pang of regret. I had pushed aside my own pain for so long, believing it was easier to carry the burden alone than to confront the painful truths of my past. But now, standing on the precipice of honesty with Emily, I questioned whether I had made the right choice. Had I been selfish in seeking solace in her arms, or was it an act of desperation to finally shed the weight of silence? Lost in contemplation, I heard a soft knock on the bedroom door, and Emily's voice, filled with concern, pierced through the haze of my thoughts. "Alex, can I come in?" she asked gently, her tone a delicate balance of respect for my need for space and her desire to comfort me. I hesitated, torn between the comfort of solitude and the yearning for Emily's presence. With a deep breath, I opened the door, finding her standing there, her eyes soft with understanding. Without a word, she crossed the room and enveloped me in her arms once more, holding me close as if to shield me from the weight of my own memories. "I'm sorry," I whispered against her shoulder, the words heavy with remorse. "I didn't mean to burden you with all of this." Emily pulled back slightly, her hands framing my face as she met my gaze with unwavering sincerity. "Alex, you're not burdening me," she said firmly, her voice carrying a quiet strength. "I want to be here for you, through the good times and the bad. Your pain is mine too now, and we'll face it together." Her words were a lifeline in the storm of my doubts, grounding me in the reality of our shared love and commitment. In that moment, I felt a flicker of hope. A belief that maybe, just maybe, my past didn't have to define our future. Emily's unwavering support offered me the courage to confront the demons I had long kept at bay, knowing that she would be there every step of the way. As we stood there in the quiet embrace of our bedroom, the weight of my confession began to lift. Emily's presence became a source of strength, a reminder that I wasn't alone in my struggle. Together, we would navigate the complexities of my trauma, forging a path toward healing and understanding. I thought my wife understood me. But no. She was still affected and changed after I told her about my traumatic past. The days following my confession to Emily brought subtle, yet noticeable changes in our relationship. It was as if my words had cast a shadow over us, one that neither of us could ignore but both struggled to address. Our once effortless intimacy now felt tentative, our conversations laced with unspoken fears and uncertainties. Emily tried to maintain our routines, but I could sense a shift in her demeanor. She seemed more reserved, her touches less frequent and more hesitant. In the past, we would cuddle on the couch, her head resting comfortably on my shoulder. Now, she sat a bit further away, her body language reflecting an invisible barrier that had sprung up between us. One evening, as we sat together watching a movie, I noticed her glancing at me more often, her eyes filled with concern. I reached out to hold her hand, hoping to bridge the gap, but she flinched slightly before intertwining her fingers with mine. The momentary hesitation stung, a reminder of the chasm that had opened between us. "Are you okay?" I asked gently, squeezing her hand for reassurance. Emily forced a smile, but it didn't reach her eyes. "I'm fine, just tired," she replied, her voice lacking its usual warmth. "Work has been really stressful." I nodded, not wanting to press further but feeling the weight of her words. The truth was, I felt tired too. Tired of the distance, the tension, and the uncertainty that now colored our interactions. As days turned into weeks, the strain between us grew more palpable. We spoke less about our feelings and more about mundane topics, avoiding anything that might dredge up the pain we were both grappling with. Our once lively dinner conversations became silent affairs, punctuated only by the clinking of cutlery and the hum of the kitchen appliances. No more kisses when I came back from work and no more initiating anything intimate from her side. She wasn't mean or anything, but I felt like something was bothering her. I tried to apologize for maybe making her uncomfortable, but she would just claim there was nothing bothering her and I was just being paranoid. Each day seemed to bring a new layer of tension. Emily's once vibrant laughter became rarer, her smiles more subdued. We went through the motions of daily life, cooking dinner, watching TV, going to bed. Yet it felt as if we were merely actors playing our parts, disconnected from the true essence of our relationship. Emily often retreated to the bedroom earlier than usual, citing fatigue. I would follow her shortly after, lying next to her in silence, the chasm between us growing with each passing night. I missed the spontaneous moments of intimacy we used to share, the small gestures of affection that had once been so natural and comforting. One evening, as we sat at the dinner table, the silence between us felt suffocating. I decided to address the elephant in the room. "Emily, I feel like we're drifting apart," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "I miss the way we used to be." She looked up from her plate, her eyes filled with a mixture of sadness and frustration. "I'm trying, Alex," she replied, her voice tinged with exhaustion. "But it's hard. It's hard to know how to act, what to say. I don't want to make things worse." Her words cut deep, amplifying the guilt I already felt. "I don't want you to feel like you have to walk on eggshells around me," I said, reaching across the table to take her hand. "We need to find a way to navigate this together." Emily squeezed my hand, but her eyes remained distant. "I know," she said softly. "I just need time." Despite our efforts to address the distance, the unease continued to grow. I began to notice small things that fueled my anxiety. Emily spending more time on her phone, her responses becoming more curt and mechanical. She seemed lost in her thoughts, often staring off into space, her mind miles away. One weekend I suggested we go for a hike, hoping that some fresh air and time away from the house might help us reconnect. Emily agreed, though her enthusiasm seemed forced. As we walked through the forest trails, the natural beauty around us felt like a stark contrast to the turmoil within. "Do you remember our first hike together?" I asked, trying to spark a memory that might bring us closer. "We got lost and ended up finding that beautiful waterfall." Emily smiled faintly, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Yeah, I remember," she said. "That was a good day." I longed for the warmth of that memory, the ease with which we had navigated our adventures together. But now, it felt like we were both lost in a different kind of wilderness, one where the path forward was obscured by the shadows of my past and the uncertainty of our future. The tension finally came to a head one evening over something as mundane as taking out the trash. It was a simple chore, one that we usually shared without issue. But that night, the simmering frustration boiled over. "Why didn't you take out the trash like you said you would?" I asked, trying to keep my tone neutral. Emily's response was sharp, her eyes flashing with anger. "I forgot, okay? It's not the end of the world." I took a deep breath, trying to stay calm. "It's not about the trash, Emily. It's about the fact that you said you would do it and then you didn't. It's like you don't care anymore." Her eyes narrowed, and I could see the hurt and anger boiling beneath the surface. "Don't you dare accuse me of not caring," she snapped. "I've been doing everything I can to support you, but it's never enough, is it?" The words hit me like a punch to the gut. "That's not fair," I said, my voice rising. "I never asked you to." "At least I'm not lying about being raped, you fucking narcissist," she spat out, her face contorted with rage. I stood there, stunned into silence. The room seemed to spin around me, her words echoing in my mind. I couldn't process what had just come out of her mouth. The air between us crackled with the intensity of her anger, and I felt as if the ground had been ripped out from under me. Emily's eyes widened as she realized what she had said. "Alex, I didn't mean," she began, her voice trembling. But I couldn't listen. The hurt and betrayal were too overwhelming. I turned on my heel, storming out of the room and slamming the door behind me. The walls seemed to close in on me as I tried to make sense of what had just happened. I retreated to the sanctuary of our bedroom, seeking refuge in the solitude that provided a brief respite from the tumultuous emotions swirling inside me. Emily lingered in the doorway, a silent sentinel of support. As I paced the length of the room, I grappled with the overwhelming turmoil that threatened to consume me. A flood of emotions unleashed by the unexpected trigger of our argument. In the quiet of the night, I found myself reflecting on the sequence of events that had unfolded. The innocuous television show, the resurgence of memories long buried, and the fragile facade of control that had shattered with startling swiftness. Guilt gnawed at my conscience like a relentless predator, whispering accusations of weakness and inadequacy. How could I burden Emily with the weight of my past? Was it fair to disrupt our tranquil life together with the storm of my unresolved trauma? I sat on the edge of the bed, my head in my hands, trying to steady my breathing. Emily's words echoed in my mind, a painful reminder of the rift that had formed between us. I wanted to believe that she didn't mean what she had said, that it was a moment of anger and frustration. But the sting of her accusation cut deep, amplifying the insecurities I had battled for so long. A soft knock on the door pulled me from my thoughts. Emily stood there, her eyes red-rimmed from crying. She approached cautiously, as if afraid to shatter the fragile truce that had settled over us. "Alex," she began, her voice trembling. "I'm so sorry for what I said. I didn't mean it. I was angry and I lashed out. Please, believe me." I looked up at her, my eyes filled with hurt and confusion. "Why did you say it then? How could you use my trauma against me like that?" Emily's shoulders sagged, and she sank to the floor in front of me, her tears falling freely. "I don't know," she whispered. "I was angry and frustrated, and I said something I didn't mean. I know I hurt you, and I hate myself for it." But I couldn't hear her. The betrayal and shock were too overwhelming. The very person I had confided in, the one I trusted with my deepest, darkest secret, had weaponized my trauma against me in a moment of anger. My vision blurred with tears, and I could feel my hands trembling. "How could you?" I whispered, my voice breaking. "How could you say that to me?" Emily reached out, but I recoiled, unable to bear her touch. "Alex, please, I'm so sorry," she pleaded, her own eyes brimming with tears. "I didn't mean it. I was angry and frustrated. Please, believe me." But the damage was done. I could see the regret in her eyes, but it did little to soothe the pain that now coursed through me. The weight of her words crushed me, each syllable a reminder of the trust that had been shattered. Unable to stay in the same room, I turned on my heel and stormed out, the walls of our home closing in on me. I needed to get away, to put some distance between us before I said something I might regret. "Alex, wait," Emily cried, but I was already moving toward the door, driven by a desperate need to escape the suffocating tension. I grabbed my coat and keys, my mind a whirlwind of emotions. The cool night air hit me like a shock as I stepped outside, but it did little to calm the storm raging within. I could hear Emily calling after me, her voice filled with desperation, but I kept walking, unable to face her after what she had said. I made my way to my car and slid into the driver's seat, gripping the steering wheel tightly as I tried to steady my breathing. The pain and betrayal were overwhelming, a torrent of emotions that I couldn't contain. I sat there for a moment, my mind racing as I tried to process what had just happened. The memories of our argument replayed in my mind, each exchange more painful than the last. Emily's face, twisted in anger, her words cutting deeper than any physical wound ever could. The realization that she had used my trauma against me, even in a moment of rage, was almost too much to bear. I started the car and drove aimlessly, the darkened streets offering a temporary reprieve from the chaos in my mind. I needed to clear my head, to find some semblance of calm amidst the turmoil. My thoughts kept circling back to the same painful truth. The woman I loved, the one person I thought understood me, had betrayed my trust in the most hurtful way possible. Eventually, I found myself parked at a small secluded park on the edge of town. It was a place I had often gone to when I needed to think, to escape the pressures of everyday life. I got out of the car and walked to a bench near the lake, the stillness of the water mirroring the emptiness I felt inside. I sat down, my head in my hands, as the enormity of what had happened washed over me. The quiet of the night provided a stark contrast to the storm of emotions swirling within me. I felt a sense of isolation, a loneliness that gnawed at my soul. As I sat there, I found myself reflecting on the sequence of events that had led to this moment. The innocuous television show that had triggered a flood of painful memories, the fragile facade of control that had shattered so easily, and now, the harsh reality of Emily's words cutting through the last remnants of my emotional defenses. Guilt and self-doubt gnawed at me, whispering accusations of weakness and inadequacy. How could I have let things get this far? Was it fair to burden Emily with the weight of my past? The questions circled in my mind, relentless and unforgiving. Sitting there for a while, trying to make sense of the whirlwind of emotions swirling within me, I realized I needed to escape the oppressive atmosphere of our home. The words Emily had thrown at me during our argument still echoed painfully in my mind. The betrayal, the shock, and the hurt were overwhelming, and I needed space to breathe, to think, and to figure out my next steps. I decided to drive to my friend Tom's house. Tom and I had been close since college, and he had always been a steady and supportive presence in my life. I hoped that being around someone who knew me well would provide some clarity, or at least a temporary reprieve from the chaos. As I pulled into his driveway, a mix of relief and dread washed over me. I knew I needed to talk to someone, but I wasn't sure if I was ready to open up about everything that had happened. Entering Tom's home brought a sense of comfort. It was familiar, filled with the memories of countless late-night conversations, shared laughs, and mutual support. The cozy interior, with its well-worn furniture and the faint smell of coffee, felt like a safe haven. I settled into the spare room, the same room I had stayed in during previous visits, and tried to calm the storm raging inside me. Lying on the couch that night, sleep was elusive. My mind was a relentless loop of thoughts about Emily, about our past, and about the hurtful words she had said. The sense of betrayal was raw and fresh. Emily had tried calling me multiple times since I left. Each time my phone buzzed with her name, I felt a sharp pang of guilt and pain. Despite the deep connection we shared, I couldn't bring myself to answer. The wound was too fresh, and the hurt too raw. Eventually I blocked her number, needing to protect my own fragile emotional state. The next morning, I found myself at Tom's kitchen table, nursing a cup of coffee and staring blankly ahead. My thoughts kept circling back to the argument, to Emily's words, and to the sense of abandonment that now hung over me. I knew I had likely hurt her by leaving, by blocking her calls and messages, but I couldn't face her anger and disappointment on top of my own pain. Emily's messages, which I saw before blocking her, were filled with a mix of anger and desperation. She accused me of abandoning her, of not acknowledging all the good she had done for me. She reminded me of the times she had supported me, had shared her life and love with me, and now, in her eyes, I was the one leaving her behind. Her words stung. There was truth in them, but there was also a deep misunderstanding. Yes, Emily had been there for me in many ways, but her recent behavior, the hurtful things she had said, had created a chasm between us that I didn't know how to bridge. It was clear that she was struggling too, that she felt overwhelmed by the weight of my past and the burden of supporting me through my trauma. But instead of acknowledging her own struggles, she seemed to blame me for all our problems. I knew I might have trauma dumped on her, overwhelmed her with the weight of my unresolved past. I understood that it was a lot for anyone to handle, especially someone who loved me and wanted to help. But I had hoped for some form of acknowledgement, some support that went beyond the initial empathy she had shown. Instead, I felt more isolated and alone than ever. In the solitude of Tom's house, I tried to make sense of my feelings. I felt guilty for leaving Emily, for blocking her, for not facing her anger and disappointment. But I also felt a deep sense of betrayal. The woman I loved, the one person I thought understood me, had used my deepest pain against me in a moment of anger. The trust we had built over 6 years felt shattered, and I didn't know how to rebuild it. During the days I spent at Tom's house, I did a lot of soul searching. I reflected on my relationship with Emily, on the good times and the bad, and on the deep love we shared. I thought about the countless moments of joy, of shared dreams and plans for the future. But I also couldn't ignore the pain of our recent interactions, the distance that had grown between us, and the harsh words she had thrown at me. I had seen 2 therapists in the past, but neither seemed to help much. They had scratched the surface of my trauma, but the deep wounds remained, festering and unresolved. I knew I needed help, but finding the right therapist, someone who truly understood the depth of my pain, felt like an insurmountable task. The idea of divorce kept gnawing at me. My gut told me to leave, to protect myself from further hurt and betrayal. But my heart resisted. Emily was genuinely the love of my life. Despite everything, I still loved her deeply. The thought of throwing away 6 years of our lives together because of one moment of anger and hurt didn't sit right with me. I was caught in a painful limbo, torn between the urge to protect myself and the desire to salvage what we had built together. I spent hours sitting by the lake near Tom's house, a place that had always brought me a sense of peace. The calm water and the gentle rustling of leaves provided a backdrop for my internal struggle. I thought about the times Emily had supported me, the ways she had shown her love and care. I remembered the laughter, the shared adventures, and the quiet moments of intimacy that had defined our relationship. But alongside those memories were the recent arguments, the distance that had grown between us, and the devastating impact of her hurtful words. I felt a deep sense of betrayal, a wound that cut to the core of my being. The woman I trusted most had turned my pain against me, and I didn't know how to move past that. I thought about the support I needed, the acknowledgement of my pain that I craved. I realized that while Emily had tried to be there for me, she was also dealing with her own struggles. Her frustration and anger were signs that she was overwhelmed, that she didn't know how to handle the weight of my trauma. I had expected her to be strong for both of us, but that wasn't fair. She was only human, with her own limits and vulnerabilities. Tom suggested I try therapy again, to find someone who could help me work through my trauma and the recent events with Emily. At first I resisted. My previous experiences with therapy had left me feeling more isolated and misunderstood. But as I sat by the lake, reflecting on my options, I realized that I couldn't do this alone. I needed professional help to navigate the complex emotions and the deep wounds that had resurfaced. Finding the right therapist would take time and effort, but it was a step I needed to take. I couldn't keep running from my pain or expecting Emily to carry the burden for me. I needed to face my trauma head-on, to work through it in a way that would allow me to heal and rebuild my life. After a few contemplative days at Tom's house, I found a semblance of clarity amid the solitude and reflection. The quiet, punctuated only by the occasional chirp of birds or the rustling of leaves, provided the perfect backdrop for my thoughts to settle. It became increasingly evident that avoiding Emily was not a viable long-term solution. The unresolved tension and lingering pain from our last encounter loomed over me like a dark cloud, impossible to ignore. We needed to address our issues directly and find a resolution, no matter how difficult the conversation might be. Determined to make amends, I took a deep breath and unblocked Emily's number. My fingers hovered over the keyboard for a moment before I typed out a message. "We need to talk. Can we meet somewhere neutral?" My heart pounded as I hit send, anxiety mixing with a sliver of hope. To my surprise, Emily responded almost immediately. She suggested we meet at her parents' house, emphasizing that it was a safe and familiar place for both of us. I hesitated but eventually agreed. The need to clear the air and understand where we stood outweighed my reservations. As I made my way to her parents' house, the familiar streets brought back a flood of memories. Each turn seemed to echo with fragments of our past. Laughter, shared secrets, moments of joy, and now, the shadow of our unresolved conflict. An uneasy feeling settled in my stomach, growing stronger with each step closer to the house. The once welcoming home now loomed before me, its walls holding the weight of the conversation that was about to unfold. I parked the car and sat for a moment, gathering my thoughts. The garden, meticulously maintained, was a stark contrast to the turmoil inside me. I took a deep breath, trying to steady my nerves. The path to the front door seemed longer than usual, each step a reminder of the emotional journey I was embarking on. When I finally reached the door, I hesitated, my hand hovering over the doorbell. With a final deep breath, I rang the bell. The sound echoed inside, and moments later, the door opened to reveal Emily. She looked just as conflicted as I felt, her eyes reflecting a mixture of apprehension and determination. We exchanged awkward pleasantries before making our way to the living room. The familiarity of the surroundings did little to ease the tension. As I stepped into the living room, I was greeted not only by Emily, but also by our parents. The atmosphere was thick with tension, and it was immediately apparent that this was not going to be the private conversation I had anticipated. My heart sank as I realized that Emily had called both of our parents to be present. The intimate and traumatic details of my past, which I had shared with Emily in confidence, were now laid bare for everyone to scrutinize. The familiar surroundings did little to comfort me. The furniture was arranged as it always had been, the scent of fresh flowers filled the air, and family photos adorned the walls, capturing moments of joy and togetherness. Yet despite the warmth of the setting, an icy chill ran down my spine. The eyes of everyone in the room were on me, and I felt my face flush with a mix of anger and humiliation. The private painful details of my life, things I had only ever whispered to Emily in the dead of night, were now a topic of discussion among people who had no right to that knowledge. My parents, sitting stiffly on the couch, exchanged worried glances. They had always dismissed my past trauma as an exaggeration, a cry for attention. Their expressions now were a mix of disbelief and unease, as if they were struggling to reconcile the gravity of my words with their long-held dismissals. Emily's parents, on the other hand, looked at me with a mix of pity and concern. Their eyes were soft, their postures slightly leaned towards me as if to offer silent support. This only heightened my discomfort. Pity was the last thing I wanted. It felt condescending, a reminder of my vulnerability laid bare in such a public manner. I stood there, feeling exposed and betrayed. Emily's eyes met mine, and I saw a glimmer of regret. But the damage was done. She had breached the trust I had placed in her by involving our families in what should have been a private matter. My mind raced, trying to process the situation. My parents' dismissive attitudes from the past flooded back to me. Memories of their disbelief and my resulting isolation making my blood boil. "I thought we were going to talk privately," I said, my voice trembling with a barely contained mix of hurt and anger. Emily took a step forward, her face full of remorse. "I thought it would help if everyone knew. If we could all support you together," she explained, her voice soft and pleading. "You had no right," I snapped, unable to contain my frustration. "This was between us." My father, who had been silent until now, spoke up. "Son, if there's something you want to tell us, we're here to listen," he said, his tone surprisingly gentle but laced with the same skepticism that had always been there. I looked at him, then at my mother, who was nodding in agreement, her eyes wide with a mix of concern and disbelief. The room seemed to close in on me, the walls pressing closer as the weight of their stares bore down. I felt like a child again, desperately trying to make them understand something they were unwilling or unable to grasp. Emily's mother interjected, her voice soothing. "We just want to help, dear. No one is here to judge you." But I did feel judged, and more than that, I felt betrayed. I had come here to find some resolution with Emily, not to have my past trauma turned into a family intervention. The anger and embarrassment were overwhelming, and I struggled to find the right words to convey the depth of my betrayal. Taking a deep breath, I finally spoke, my voice shaking but firm. "I appreciate that you all want to help, but this isn't the way to do it. My past is my own, and I decide who I share it with. This conversation was supposed to be between Emily and me." The silence that followed was heavy, the air thick with unspoken words and unresolved emotions. Emily's eyes filled with tears and my parents exchanged another glance, this time tinged with a bit more understanding. "I'm sorry," Emily whispered. "I didn't mean to hurt you." I nodded, swallowing hard. "I know. But trust is fragile. And right now, it's shattered." Emily began to speak, her voice wavering as she tried to justify her actions. "I thought involving our parents was necessary," she said, her eyes pleading for understanding. "We needed mediation, someone to help us find a resolution." Her words felt like a dagger to my heart. To me, it felt like a betrayal of the deepest kind. The trauma I had buried for so long, the painful memories I had shared with her in the most vulnerable moments, were now exposed, turned into a spectacle for others to judge and dissect. I glanced around the room, my gaze landing on my second cousin, who stood awkwardly in the corner. He had also been informed and invited, a further reminder of the extent of Emily's breach of trust. His presence was a stark indication of how far-reaching this situation had become. The room was thick with tension, the kind that makes the air heavy and every breath feel laborious. The room fell silent, the weight of my words hanging heavily in the air. My second cousin shifted uncomfortably, clearly wishing he were anywhere but here. The awkwardness and discomfort were palpable, radiating from everyone present. I continued, struggling to keep my voice steady, "that you were someone I could trust. I confided in you because I believed you understood me, that you would protect my secrets. Instead, you've turned them into a public spectacle." My father cleared his throat, his voice gruff. "We didn't realize the extent of what you went through," he admitted, his eyes softening slightly. "But involving everyone like this, it doesn't seem right." Emily's father nodded in agreement. "Maybe we should give you two some space to talk this through privately." I shook my head, the anger and hurt too overwhelming. "It's too late for that now, the damage is done." Emily's tears flowed freely now, her shoulders shaking with silent sobs. "I'm so sorry," she whispered. "I didn't mean to hurt you." As the conversation swirled around me, a cacophony of voices and opinions blending into an overwhelming noise, I felt a growing sense of detachment. The room, once filled with familiar faces, now seemed foreign and hostile. The trust and love I had once felt for Emily seemed to evaporate in the face of this public humiliation. She had crossed a line that I couldn't forgive. Involving our families in such a deeply personal matter was not just a breach of trust but also a clear indication of her lack of sophistication and sympathy. I sat there, my mind racing with thoughts and emotions, the noise around me fading into a dull hum. My gaze fixed on Emily, who was still attempting to justify her actions, her eyes wide with desperation and regret. But her words were lost on me, drowned out by the roar of my anger and sorrow. Each word she spoke felt like another blow, deepening the chasm between us. Finally, I could take no more. I stood up abruptly, cutting through the ongoing conversation like a knife. The room fell silent, all eyes turning to me. My voice was steady, though inside I was trembling with a mixture of anger and sorrow. "I can't do this anymore," I announced, looking directly at Emily. Her eyes widened, a flicker of fear crossing her face. "I can't be with someone who would betray my trust and use my past as a weapon. I'm filing for divorce." The words hung heavily in the air, their finality unmistakable. Emily's face went pale, and a murmur of shock rippled through the room. My parents, sitting to my right, looked at me with a mixture of shock and concern, their expressions pleading for me to reconsider. They tried to speak, but I raised a hand to silence them, my resolve unshaken. "This is not up for discussion," I continued, my voice firm. "I've made my decision." Emily's eyes filled with tears, her voice breaking as she tried to respond. "Please, don't do this," she begged. "I was only trying to help." "Help?" I repeated, incredulous. "You call this help? You turned my deepest pain into a public spectacle. You betrayed me, Emily. There's no coming back from that. The room remained silent, the weight of my words pressing down on everyone present. Emily's parents exchanged a worried glance, their faces etched with concern and helplessness. My second cousin, still standing awkwardly in the corner, looked away, clearly uncomfortable with the unfolding drama. My mother finally found her voice, her tone soft and pleading. "Please, let's not rush into anything. We can work through this as a family." I shook my head, the pain and betrayal too fresh, too overwhelming. "This isn't something that can be fixed," I said, my voice breaking slightly. "The trust is gone." Turning to leave, I felt a sense of finality wash over me. The road ahead was uncertain and filled with pain, but staying would only deepen the wounds. As I walked towards the door, Emily called out one last time, her voice choked with tears. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I never meant for this to happen." I paused, my hand on the doorknob, and took a deep breath. Without turning around, I replied, "Sorry isn't enough." And with that, I stepped out of the room, leaving behind a whirlwind of emotions and a marriage shattered beyond repair. The drive home was a blur, my mind replaying the events over and over. The betrayal, the humiliation, the final decision to walk away, it all felt surreal, like a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. But as I pulled into my driveway, a strange sense of calm settled over me. I had made my choice, and now, I had to face the consequences and begin the painful process of healing. The days that followed were filled with difficult conversations and legal proceedings. My parents tried to reach out, their concern evident, but I kept them at arm's length, needing time to process everything on my own. Emily made several attempts to contact me, her messages filled with regret and pleas for another chance. But my decision was firm. The trust was broken, and there was no going back. As the weeks turned into months, the pain slowly began to dull, replaced by a sense of acceptance. I threw myself into work and leaned on friends who offered support and understanding. The journey to healing was long and arduous, but each day brought a small measure of progress. And in time I found a new sense of strength and resilience, determined to move forward and rebuild my life on my own terms. The 6 years Emily and I had spent together, the love we had shared, were now overshadowed by this moment of betrayal. Each step away from the front door felt heavier than the last, as memories of our time together flooded my mind. The laughter, the shared dreams, the silent moments of comfort, they all seemed tainted now. As I drove away, the reality of the situation began to sink in. I thought about the future and what it would look like without Emily by my side. Living a fake life, pretending that everything was okay, was not an option for me. I needed authenticity, honesty, and respect in my relationships. Emily had shown that she was incapable of providing that. The decision to divorce was painful, but it was the right one. Our feelings for each other, once passionate and genuine, had been irreparably damaged. It was time to close this chapter of my life and start anew. The drive was long and quiet, giving me plenty of time to reflect. The scenery outside the window changed from familiar suburban streets to open highways, mirroring the transition I was making in my own life. I thought about the person I used to be before Emily and I met, and the person I wanted to become now. The future seemed daunting, but also full of possibilities. In the days that followed, I began the process of filing for divorce. It was a whirlwind of legal documents and meetings with attorneys, each step solidifying the end of our marriage. I moved my things out of the house we had shared, carefully packing away the remnants of our life together. The once cozy home now felt like a museum of memories, each room holding echoes of the past. I found solace in the support of friends like Tom, who offered a listening ear and a place to stay while I figured out my next steps. Avoiding contact with Emily and our families was crucial for my healing. Every phone call, every message felt like a reopening of wounds that were just beginning to close. I needed time and space to process everything, to mourn the end of our relationship, and to rebuild my sense of self. The decision to end our marriage was met with mixed reactions. Some friends and family members understood and supported me, recognizing the gravity of Emily's betrayal. Others questioned whether I was making the right choice, suggesting that perhaps we could still work things out. But deep down, I knew it was the only way forward. I couldn't continue to live a lie, to pretend that everything was fine when it was far from it. Tom was a constant source of support during this time. He would often invite me over for dinner or just to hang out, helping to distract me from the turmoil of the divorce proceedings. One evening, as we sat on his porch watching the sunset, he turned to me and said, "You know, this isn't the end. It's just a new beginning. You've got a whole life ahead of you, and you get to decide what that looks like." His words resonated with me. Slowly, I began to see the divorce not as a failure, but as an opportunity for growth and self-discovery. I threw myself into my work, finding solace in the routine and the sense of accomplishment it brought. I also started to reconnect with old hobbies and interests that I had neglected during my marriage. Photography, which had always been a passion of mine, became a therapeutic outlet. Capturing the beauty of the world through my lens helped me see the beauty in my own journey of healing. I also sought professional help, seeing a therapist who helped me navigate the complex emotions I was experiencing. She guided me through the process of understanding my feelings, validating my pain, and helping me find ways to cope and move forward. Through our sessions, I began to regain a sense of control over my life and my future. Gradually, I started to envision a new life for myself. One filled with honesty, respect, and genuine connections. I knew it wouldn't be easy, and there would be moments of doubt and loneliness. But I was determined to build a future that was true to who I was. The journey ahead was uncertain, but for the first time in a long while, I felt hopeful. Emily would always be a part of my past, a chapter in my story that had shaped me in many ways. But as I moved forward, I was determined to write new chapters, ones filled with growth, healing, and the promise of better days ahead.